Chapter 132. Give it to Madame D. Shui Rulin asked confusedly and felt uneasy. She also wanted to give it to Madame D, but like Qin Wanru, she did not dare to do it. Madame D plotted against her in General's mansion that day and led the drunk Qin Huayong to her bedroom. Now she might have done something worse. She could not bear the consequences of letting Madame D be the housekeeper. No. Qin Wanru shook her head and directly rejected. Madame D was not in her consideration. Then give it to concubine Su or concubine Dong. Shui Rulin raised another possibility. Qin Huayong only had 2 concubines, and they were recommended by the former servant girls. After Madame D married them, according to the rules, Madame D made the decision to recommend them. In the past, they had always been well behaved in the mansion. Mother, let's try concubine Su first. She used to manage more affairs in the mansion. Compared with concubine Dong, father seems to trust her more. I can help occasionally, but not too much. I can only help you when you are in charge. In this way, Madame D will not say anything. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said. There were only a few people in the mansion, so they could only do this for the time being. In fact, Qin Wanru wanted to directly intervene in the housekeeping, but this was not reasonable. Qin Yuru did not intervene. She was still young, how could she directly manage the housekeeping? But if Qin Yuru intervened, Madame D would definitely come in forcefully. After all, she was Qin Yuru's biological mother and it was reasonable for her to help Qin Yuru. In order to get rid of Qin Yuru, Qin Wanru could only help Shui Rulin a little, and it was limited to Shui Rulin's own affairs. After all, she was now Qin Wanru's mother. Hearing Qin Wanru's words, Shui Rulin was also relieved. Later, Qin Wanru gave her some medicine and asked Xianghua to make it and decoct it by herself. She just told others that she was not used to the environment recently and there was no need to go out to see a doctor. This time Madame D did not help Shui Rulin, but it did not mean that she would not help Shui Rulin in the future. Both Qin Wanru and Shui Rulin knew clearly that as long as Madame D found out Shui Rulin was pregnant, she would definitely destroy the child in Shui Rulin's belly at all costs. Madame D did not have a son, which was her Achilles heel. After telling Shui Rulin some precautions, Qin Wanru was about to get up. It could be seen that Shui Rulin was really tired at this time. Madame Shui, you must uphold justice for our young miss. Just as she got up, she suddenly heard a sharp cry from outside. It seemed that someone was crying while running in, but in the end, she didn't really run in. It seemed that she was stopped by the maid in the courtyard. Hearing the familiar voice, Qin Wanru understood after thinking for a while. She smiled and sat down again. Qin Yuru and Qi Rongji were fighting again. He knew that his words from before were effective. What's going on? Shui Rulin's face darkened. After she became the housekeeper, her momentum was much stronger than before. Qianghua nodded and ran out. After a while, she came back and reported, Madam, it's Mei Shui, the maid of the first Mississippi. She said that the first Miss and Miss Chi fought again. Miss Chi beat the first Miss and smashed the things in the first Miss's room. It's a mess. Please go and have a look. Let's go and take a look. Shui Rulin rubbed her forehead, knowing that she, as the steward's wife, had to come forward to mediate. Mother, I'll go with you. Please be careful. Qin Wanru also stood up and said. She was worried about Shui Rulin. Shui Rulin saw the worry in Qin Wanru's eyes and nodded immediately. They went out of the door together and saw Mei Shui in the courtyard with disheveled hair and a few bloodstains on her face. She was really pitiful. Madame Shui, save our first Mississippi. Mei Shui was stopped by 2 rough old maids and couldn't enter the room. Seeing Shui Rulin coming out, she pushed away the old maid in front of her and rushed over. Qin Wanru took a step forward and stood in front of Shui Rulin, looking at Mei Shui coldly. Mei Shui was inexplicably panicked and stopped hurriedly, not daring to rush forward. Lead the way. Qin Wanru said lightly. Facing Qin Wanru's cold watery eyes, Mei Shui didn't dare to make a scene again. She wiped her tears and turned to lead the way. She couldn't help feeling anxious and peeked at Qin Wanru carefully. She didn't know when second miss, who was always bullied by first miss, became so imposing. Mei Shui's eyes met Yujie's. Yujie glared at her fiercely, and Mei Shui hurriedly turned her head away. Not only second miss, but also second miss's servant girl was so imposing. When they arrived at Qin Yuru's Yalan Pavilion, it was a mess, but it was basically under control. The so-called under control was that Qi Rongji's arm was pressed on the small stool, Madame D was sitting with a cold face, and Qin Yuru covered her face with her hands and stared at Qi Rongji fiercely. Did it mean that they were waiting for Shui Rulan to come? Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Madame D. When she saw Madame D's cold eyes fall on Shui Rulan's flat belly, her heart involuntarily thumped. Could it be that Madame D also noticed something, so she wanted to take the opportunity to harm Shui Rulan? It seemed that today she had to act according to the circumstances and break Madame D's trap. There were overturned chairs and stools in the room, as well as some messy things and some broken porcelain. There was even no place to stand. Shui Rulan didn't directly enter the room. She first directed several old maids to clean up the floor of the room, and then took Qin Wanru into the room and sat down on a chair on the side. Sister, as the supervisor of the mansion, you come so quickly. If you come a little later, I am afraid that Yuru will be hurt by first Miss Qi again. As soon as Madame D looked at Shui Rulan, her triangular eyes became vertical, and she sneered in a sinister way. A good plan was now ruined because of the intervention of the young Madame of Duke Yangxiu's heir. How could she be calm? Originally, as long as something happened to Shui Rulan a few days later, the inner court of Qin's mansion would fall into her hands again, but at the last moment, she had to stop it. This feeling of grievance and hatred made it impossible for her to talk to Shui Rulan calmly for a while. Sister, you come so early. What happened here? Shui Rulan didn't care about her, but asked gently, glancing at Qi Rongji who was held tightly by two old maids. Madame Shui, is this the way of treating guests in your mansion? Anyway, when I followed you into the mansion, my father and mother entrusted me to you, and said that everything could be negotiated if the two mansions were on good terms. But what is this now? How dare you hold me down? I am the daughter of the magistrate of Qin's mansion. Qi Rongji struggled hard, but her hands were held down and she couldn't move at all. She was furious for a moment, and stared at Shui Rulan. Let go of first Miss Qi. Shui Rulan said. The two old maids glanced at Madame D and didn't dare to let go. Sister, first Miss Qi is a guest of our mansion. Moreover, the general has repeatedly talked about what happened after she came to the capital city. It is Magistrate Qi who asked our mansion to take care of first Miss Qi. If we break our promise, I am afraid it is not good. Shui Rulan turned to look at Madame D, and her words were very polite and beautiful. But the meaning in her words made Madame D think more. Not only Qi Rongji was in the capital city, but also the Qi brothers, especially Qi Tianyu was also in the capital city. If he talked about what happened in Jiangzhou in the capital city, then Qin Yuru's reputation would be as bad as when she was in Jiangzhou. Let her go. Madame D clenched her teeth, waved her hand and said. The two old maids obeyed and left. Qi Rongji waved her arms and moved them. First Miss Qi, now can you tell me why you find Yuru to make trouble? Although your mansion also depends on the general, if you are always disobedient, our mansion can't afford to hire a bodhisattva like you. Shui Rulan's eyes fell on Qi Rongji, who looked indignant, and her face darkened. She meant that if Qi Rongji didn't behave, she would send her back to the Qi mansion, which also had a mansion in the capital city. Qi Rongji didn't expect Shui Rulan to be so strong-willed. Hearing Shui Rulan's words, she felt a little embarrassed and immediately flew into a rage. Shui Rulan, you Qin Wanru snorted and took a step forward. She stretched out her hand and slapped Qi Rongji's face hard. Qi Rongji, this is Qin's mansion, not your Qi mansion in Jiangzhou. If you want to make a scene, go back to Jiangzhou directly. We don't welcome you here. Qin Wanru said coldly, and then wiped her palm with a handkerchief. Her white and tender face looked a little fierce. No one expected that Qin Wanru would directly slap Qi Rongji without saying anything. For a moment, the room was strangely quiet, and everyone looked at Qin Wanru in shock. Qi Rongji's eyes widened. She covered her face with one hand and stared at Qin Wanru fiercely. She couldn't wait to jump up and scratch Qin Wanru's delicate face. But this slap also woke her up. She could be arrogant in front of Madame D and her daughter, but not in front of Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru. After all, they were really not afraid of what she would say outside. Speaking of what happened in Jiangzhou, it was Madame D and her daughter who started it. It was Madame D and her daughter who wanted to ruin the reputation of Madame D and her daughter. It had nothing to do with Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan. Even they might hope that she would make a scene because of this. The bigger the scene, the better it would be for them. After thinking about this, Qi Rongji gritted her teeth and stared at Qin Wanru fiercely. She endured it. Wanru, what are you doing? Madame D obviously realized this. She patted the table and said angrily. What's wrong with you, madam? I'm venting for big sister. Just now Miss Qi also slapped big sister. Isn't it just right for us to slap her back? Qin Wanru looked puzzled. She looked back at Qin Yuru, who was still covering her face. Needless to say, Qin Yuru must have been slapped. Because of Qi Rongji's own strength and Qin Yuru's diffidence when facing Qi Rongji, it was more likely that Qin Yuru would be slapped if they really fought. Although Qin Yuru didn't like Qi Rongji, she felt relieved when she saw Qi Rongji being slapped. She put down her hand that was covering her face. Sure enough, there was a big red patch on her face. There was a big palm print on her face. Qi Rongji, tell me, why did you fight with big sister this time? Since the facts were in front of her, Qin Wanru also took a step back, sat in front of the chair beside her, and said coldly. Chapter 133. Qi Rongji's servant girl, who had been held down by the servant girl of Qin's mansion, saw her master running out, and broke free from the hand of the servant girl of Qin's mansion and chased after her. The room suddenly became quiet. A trace of darkness flashed in Qin Wanru's watery eyes. Without Qi Rongji, Madame D could not do something even if she wanted to, but she would not take it lightly. Wanru, look at what you've done. You've driven Qi Rongji away. If your father asks about it later, you'll have to tell him yourself. Mrs. Qin's face darkened and she immediately pushed all the blame onto Qin Wanru. Madam, isn't the cause of the fight between Big Sister and Miss Qi? Do I have to help Miss Qi to beat Big Sister? Qin Wanru blinked her big beautiful eyes and said innocently. What? But you can't beat her at this time. Qin Yuru also stood on Madame D's side. She also thought about the consequences and felt a little guilty. She had the same idea as Madame D, that was, to push all the blame to Qin Wanru. Seeing that both of them kept saying that Qin Wanru beat Qi Rongji away, Shui Rulan also got angry. She coughed in a low voice and said sarcastically, what First Miss said is really unpleasant. Didn't Wanru beat Miss Qi because of you? Why didn't First Miss thank Wanru, but push all the blame to Wanru? Did Wanru make First Miss and Miss Qi fight? What do you mean, Aunt Shui? Qin Yuru snorted coldly, unconvinced, sat up straight, and looked at Shui Rulan coldly. She had always looked down on Shui Rulan, and in the past, she just maintained a superficial attitude. Now that Shui Rulan dared to intervene in her affairs, she immediately couldn't bear it. Aunt Shui. Qin Wanru smiled coldly, and her eyes fell on Qin Yuru. Big sister, do you mean that mother is still Aunt Shui now? Until now, big sister still doesn't admit the identity of mother? Qin Wanru, how dare you? This time, Madame D banged the table hard. You are just a child, what do you know? Shui Rulan, don't you want to discipline Wanru? In the future, no aristocratic family dares to marry her. Not only does she beat people, but she also speaks arrogantly. If this gets out, people will think that our general's mansion has poor education. Poor education. Everyone knows that my mother was officially married by my father in order to take care of me. Why does eldest sister still call me Aunt Shui? Even now, you still don't want to acknowledge me. Could it be that eldest sister thinks that my father doesn't deserve my mother? Qin should take this opportunity to teach Yuru a lesson. Qin married Qin Huayong. Qin Yuru had married Qin Huayong of Qin Huayong had married. Qin had married Qin Huayong. Married Qin Huayong married Qin Huayong R, and Roof Qin R, Qin thought. Why Hu Huayong? Chu, Song, Qin Huayong, Yuru, Li, Yuru, R, of Ru of Qi, who, the reason why Qin Huayong married Shui Rulan was that a lot of things had happened. If these things were exposed, they would be related to what had happened in Jiangzhou, including Qi Tianyu, Qin Yuru, and their almost successful marriage. Among all these things, Qin Yuru didn't say anything good about Qin Yuru. Her words were sharp. Qin Wanru's small figure stood in the room, showing a bit of coldness that could not be ignored. Hearing that, Madame D hurriedly calmed down. Her previous plan did not go well, which made her angry for a while. She wanted to vent her anger but could not. That was why she said those words just now and lost the initiative. Yuru, change your words. Madame D suppressed the hatred in her eyes and said slowly. She secretly winked at Qin Yuru. Mother. Qin Yuru was not really stupid. She immediately understood. Madame D gave her a way out, so she accepted it. She looked up at Shui Rulan and bowed deeply to Shui Rulan with red eyes. Madame Shui, Yuru. I am sorry for offending you. In the end, her words turned into a whimper. She was really embarrassed today. Her hair was pulled out in the fight with Qi Rongji, and her clothes were messy and dirty. At this time, it seemed that she had suffered a great blow. After saying that, she took a step back and fainted. Mei Shui, who was standing behind her, hurriedly reached out to hold her and screamed, First miss, please wake up, please wake up. Please don't have any accidents. It's just a salute. It's not a big deal. Before she finished her words, she was slapped hard in the face. It was Yujie who slapped her. After that, she imitated Qin Wanru and carefully wiped her hands, as if her hands were stained with something dirty. How dare you? How dare you, a bitch, hit people? At this time, Madame D couldn't bear it anymore. She stood up angrily and said to the two old maids beside her, Take this girl away and slap her 10 times. Two fierce old maids came over and were about to pull Yujie down. However, Yujie threw them away fiercely. The two old maids who were holding her arms were thrown out and knocked down several chairs. Madame D, I remember that my father agreed that I can teach the people around me a lesson by myself. He asked Madame D not to interfere in my affairs. Qin Wanru said coldly. Madame D repeatedly hurt Qin Wanru. Qin Huayong did say such words when he was angry. But at this time, in front of so many servants, Madame D seemed to be weak. Her face froze and her eyes showed anger. Qin Wanru, how arrogant you are. How dare you say such words to your mother? Have you forgotten who brought you up? Have you forgotten who brought you up? Have you forgotten who brought you up? Seeing that her mother was at a disadvantage, Qin Yuru immediately stopped pretending to faint. She stood straight with Mei Shui's hand, pointed at Qin Wanru, and said righteously. Because I grew up in Qin's mansion, do I have to compensate my big sister with my reputation and life? Qin Wanru tilted her head and glanced at Qin Yuru, with a trace of provocation flashing on her face. It was a clear provocation. Qin Yuru's petite cherry lips curved into a sarcastic smile, and her words were even more unpleasant. Qin Wanru, you ungrateful bastard, how dare you say such words? Qin Yuru trembled with anger and almost lost her mind. What happened in Jiangzhou was a hurdle in her heart that she couldn't get over. At this time, Qin Wanru mentioned it again and again. She couldn't bear it anymore. Bastard? Am I not my father's biological son? Or is there something unspeakable about my birth? Qin Wanru was waiting for this. She provoked Madame D's mother again and again because she wanted to get the words from them that she was not Qin Huayong's biological son. If old grandma and Shui Rulan didn't say something, she wouldn't force them. But Madame D and her daughter were different. They originally stood on the opposite side. Qin Yuru didn't expect that Qin Wanru would seize this point. Thinking of her mother's warning, she looked a little flustered and subconsciously looked up at Madame D. Madame D, big sister, do you mean that I am not my father's biological son? Does it mean that there is something strange about my birth? Madame D, big sister, please tell me clearly. If I am really not my father's biological daughter, then who are my biological parents? Why did my father adopt me? Why didn't he tell me the truth? Qin Wanru's words were almost said word by word, and she pressed on step by step. Shui Rulan bit her lip and wanted to say something, but finally closed her mouth. In fact, she didn't know clearly. She only heard old grandma said that Qin Wanru's birth was different, and her father also did her cousin a favor. But old grandma didn't say the specific details, and also asked her not to ask Qin Huayong. She seemed to mean that it was better that she didn't know. Qin's mansion could raise Wanru well and raise her as a biological granddaughter. It was better than letting her know that her parents had passed away and be sad. Wanru, what nonsense are you talking about? How can you not be your father's biological daughter? Your big sister just said that because your servant girl hit her servant girl. She was so angry that she said that. I will teach her a lesson when I go back. Seeing that the situation was not good, Madame D hurriedly pulled a face and explained reluctantly. This matter, whether it was Qin Huayong's idea or her idea, they would never let Qin Wanru know that she was not her biological daughter. Then may I ask, Madam, who is my biological mother? Since Qin Wanru had already made up her mind to open a loophole through Madame D and Qin Yuru, she naturally wouldn't let them go so easily. She asked again with a frosty face. Madame D's face froze. She didn't expect Qin Wanru to be so difficult to fool. Madam, who is my biological mother? Who on earth gave birth to me? Why have I never seen her? Qin Wanru's eyes turned red. She was really angry. In her previous life, she didn't figure this out either. In the end, she didn't know who her biological parents were. In the end, she was framed and lost her life in a muddle. In this life, she wouldn't let herself be trampled on. She died of illness. She was an outsider, and it was not convenient for your father to bring her into the mansion. Moreover, your father didn't know about you before. When he found you, your mother was dying. Your father took pity on you, so he brought you into the mansion and raised you under my name, which could be considered as giving you the identity of a daughter of the first wife. Madame D stuttered to explain, but in the end, her story became smoother and smoother. Qin Wanru didn't believe what Madame D said was true. If it was true, in her previous life, Madame D and her daughter would definitely use this to attack her and warn her that she was just an outsider. However, in her previous life, she only knew that she wasn't Qin Huayong's biological daughter, and nothing else. Madam, I don't believe it. Qin Wanru clenched her fists and said coldly. If you don't believe me, you can ask your father. Speaking of it, it's not a good thing. If you didn't force me with your words, I wouldn't have said so much. Well, Wanru, go to have a rest. let's call it a day. Your elder sister has been wronged so much today. Don't make trouble anymore. Madame D pretended to be mentally and physically exhausted. She held her forehead with one hand and looked like she didn't want to say anything more. Second sister, I was wrong just now. I was bullied too much today, so I spoke without thinking. Second sister, please forgive me. Qin Yuru covered her face with a handkerchief and apologized to Qin Wanru in tears. She looked very regretful. She was indeed bullied by Qi Rongji just now. Now that she was provoked by Qin Wanru, it was reasonable for her to say something out of control. Chapter 134. If she didn't leave now, how could she leave? Taking a deep breath, Qin Wanru suddenly calmed down and lowered her long eyes. It seemed that she didn't want to pursue this matter anymore and didn't want to listen to Madame D's panicked words at all. After saying that to Shui Rulan, she turned around and walked out of the door. Shui Rulan was stunned for a moment and hurriedly got up and followed Qin Wanru. Ah! Madame D's face turned blue and white. She wanted to ask someone to stop Shui Rulan, but was pulled by Nanny Zhou and warned in a low voice, "Madam, don't act rashly." Looking at the messy servants on both sides, Nanny Zhou waved her hand and the servants left one by one, leaving only her, Madame D and her daughter in the room. But such a good opportunity. Madame D tore the handkerchief in her hand fiercely and looked at Shui Rulan's back. She gritted her teeth and said, "If I really let this bitch give birth to a son, I will lose my position in this mansion." It was the first time for Qin Yuru to hear this. She was so shocked that her eyes widened, but she didn't say anything. She just sat quietly and listened to the conversation between Nanny Zhou and Madame D. "Madam, after all, we don't know if it is true. Even if a doctor is invited, it may be because of overwork or water and soil. If you don't accept it, the doctor has never been to the capital city. Madam, we will find out more about this matter. But now you have to explain to the general about second Mrs. matter. It is really not the best time." Nanny Zhou advised with a hidden meaning. She had received a news that Shui Rulan had invited a doctor to see her. Hearing this news, Nanny Zhou immediately reported to Madame D. When Madame D heard this, she immediately thought of the pregnancy and was so anxious that she paced around in the room. Later, Nanny Zhou told her that it was not certain and they had to find out the truth before taking action. Originally, they planned to find out the truth before taking action, but they didn't expect that Qin Yuru and Qi Rongji would make trouble here. When Madame D hurried over and saw such a messy scene, she was also dizzy with anger. Later, when Nanny Zhou reminded her that this was an opportunity, she immediately understood. Shui Rulan, as the person in charge of the backyard, had to come and deal with it. At that time, no matter whether Shui Rulan was really pregnant or not, she would find a way to irritate Qi Rongji and push Shui Rulan accidentally. Even if Shui Rulan was pregnant, she would not be able to keep her pregnancy stable. If the child was gone, it couldn't be blamed on her family. At most, Qi Rongji would be sent back home. Madame Qi Rongji couldn't be blamed. Originally, Madame Qi Rongji was more disliked, but because of Qin Yuru. But because of Qi Rongji, Madame D had she. What Madame D didn't expect was that Qin Wanru actually drove Lu Rongji away in anger. Without such a proactive person who could take responsibility, things would not be so easy to handle. However, Madame D didn't give up. She wanted to find another opportunity in the chaos. However, things changed even more. Qin Yuru scolded Qin Wanru in anger, which made Qin Wanru lead the matter to her origin. In the end, Qin Wanru left sadly and Shui Rulan followed her. Madame D didn't even have a chance to take advantage of the chaos. She had to watch Shui Rulan leave with Qin Wanru. She didn't know whether Shui Rulan was pregnant or not, but now she had a bad feeling. Did that little bitch do it on purpose to protect Shui Rulan? Madame D gritted her teeth, and her eyes showed viciousness. This I don't think so. Second Miss is still young. Even if she suddenly becomes sensible, she can't know so much. Maybe it's a coincidence. Nanny Zhou didn't believe that Qin Wanru would do it on purpose. How could it be a coincidence? Nanny Zhou, have you ever thought about it? What happened to the little bitch during this period is the weirdest. She escaped every time. Not only she is fine, but Yuru and I have suffered so much because of her. Thinking of those things, Madame D's face became ferocious. I think it may have something to do with Madame Shui. Nanny Zhou didn't think an 11-year-old child could be so powerful. After thinking about it, she thought it must be Madame Shui. Shui Rulan was an adult after all. She hesitated and reminded Madame D, Madam, was Madame Shui pretending to be weak before? Hearing Nanny Zhou's words, Madame D immediately shifted her suspicion to Shui Rulan. Two dark shadows flashed in her eyes. It must be Shui Rulan, the bitch. Before she married the general, she had already schemed against me. If she gives birth to a child, the more Madame D thought about it, the more frightened she was. I won't let her give birth to a child. She gritted her teeth and said. Not letting her give birth to a child, actually, there is a way. Nanny Zhou lowered her voice and said. What way? Madame D asked. Madam, do you still want to give birth? Nanny Zhou hesitated and asked. What do you mean? Her question made Madame D blush slightly. She looked at her daughter and said, Yuru, go into the inner room. I have something to talk to Nanny Zhou. It was very inappropriate to talk about this kind of thing in front of her daughter. Yes, mother. Qin Yuru stood up obediently, turned around and walked inside. But when she just walked into the inner room, she stopped and closed the door slightly. She stood behind the door and lowered her breath, listening carefully. Madam, if you also don't want to give birth, you can actually terminate the general's marriage. Nanny Zhou's voice became lower and lower. I know a doctor who knows these things. It is said that her husband used to be an imperial physician in the palace. Later he committed a crime and was sent out. No. Nanny Zhou understood and immediately shook her head. Her voice unconsciously trembled. If Qin Huayong found out about this, her days of freedom would be over. She dared not. Then we can only start from Shui Rulan. Nanny Zhou said. How? Madame D thought this idea was good. She originally wanted to start from Shui Rulan. Let's go to the doctor and ask about it first, right? Don't ask, madam. If you ask too much, when something really happens, the doctor may find out that madam is responsible for it. Nanny Zhou shook her head and said, there are a few people in our mansion. If we were in Jiangzhou, it would be fine. But not here. Have my sister-in-law sent some people to the mansion? Hearing her words, Madame D immediately asked. Soon, in a few days. At that time, Madame D can use more people. But now whether Madame Shui is pregnant or not, we can treat it as she is pregnant. Nanny Zhou said. Then the two people's voices were very low. Madame D listened and nodded repeatedly. Qin Yuru, who was behind the door, tightly pressed her ear against the door, also heard clearly. Shui Rulan accompanied Qin Wanru back to the courtyard. She was worried about Qin Wanru. When they returned to the room together and sat down, Shui Rulan asked worriedly, Wanru, are you okay? I'm fine. Qin Wanru shook her head and said, Mother, I just found that Madame D should have suspected you. You should be more careful. Shui Rulan subconsciously covered her belly with her face slightly pale. She knows. I don't think she knows, but suspects. Mother, it is not a secret in the mansion that you asked a doctor. If she wants to check, she can definitely find it. But she can't suspect me because of this. Shui Rulan said hesitantly. Qin Wanru bit her lips and her eyes became cold. Mother, according to Madame D's character, she would rather kill the wrong person than let go. Madame D had always been vicious. Even if there was a little doubt, she would do it. If Qin Wanru thought correctly, Madame D just wanted to do something to Shui Rulan. Of course, she made use of Qi Rongji. Then what should I do? Shui Rulan's face became pale and she involuntarily asked Qin Wanru, who looked calm. She used to stay in the backyard of the Qin's mansion. Although she was a quiet person, she was not completely ignorant of Madame D's character. Hearing Qin Wanru's words, she immediately understood. Mother, Madame D will definitely do something recently. When you go out, you should arrange more servant girls and old maids. Remember not to bump into them. As for father, you should make it clear to him later. Otherwise, Madame D will plot against you before things are clear and finally say she doesn't know. In order to prevent such things from happening today, Qin Wanru thought it was better to tell this to Qin Huayong. Originally, she wanted Shui Rulan not to say it first in order to avoid attracting Madame D's attention. She would tell it after 3 months when the pregnancy was stable. But now since Madame D suspected it, it was necessary to seize the time. Okay, I will arrange more servants. I will tell your grandmother and your father about it later. Shui Rulan originally had the same idea as Qin Wanru. Now thinking about it, she also felt that Qin Wanru's method was safer. As for mother, all the necessities should be checked again and again, especially those smelly things. Mother must not use them. Ask your close servants to take care of things like clothes. You'd better set up a small kitchen for food and necessities. There are too many people in the big kitchen, and some people will inevitably neglect it. Qin Wanru warned her carefully. Her words made Shui Rulan feel a chill on her back. She faintly felt more and more uneasy. Originally, she thought it was okay to tell Qin Huayong. Now she thought about it carefully. Her cousin was in the outer court. He might not know the twists and turns of the inner court. At that time, her child might not be able to protect. She reached out to cover her abdomen with a trace of fierceness in her eyes. She was originally a gentle person, but now she was a mother. Thinking that the child in her belly might be lost because of Madame D, she immediately made up her mind that she would protect the child in any case. I will ask cousin to set up a small kitchen for me and also for Madame D. In Qin's mansion, only Madame Dowager had a small kitchen. Neither Madame D nor Shui Rulan had one. If Shui Rulan only set up a small kitchen for herself, Madame D would definitely find an excuse to make trouble. Moreover, it was indeed unreasonable. The best way was of course to set up a small kitchen for both courtyards. Mother, Madame D will definitely make trouble again about setting up a small kitchen. You should be careful. Qin Wanru reminded her again. Not only this matter, but also other things. Mother, you should pay more attention to Yulan Pavilion. I know. Shui Rulan nodded with a serious face. When they were talking, they suddenly heard Qing Yu ran in and reported, Madam, second miss, the general is here. Chapter 135. Ask my father to come in. Qin Wanru reacted quickly. After being stunned, she stood up hurriedly. No one noticed the gloom flashing in her eyes. It came so fast. It seemed that it was true. The last trace of uncertainty in her heart also faded into smoke, and then slowly turned into cold air, rushing to her heart from all over her body. It was very cold and sad. Qing Yu hurriedly turned back and ran out. Shui Rulan also wanted to stand up, but Qin Wanru reached out and pressed her slightly to stop her. Mother, just sit down. While speaking, the little servant girl lifted the curtain, and Qin Huayong strode in. Seeing Shui Rulan still here, he was slightly stunned and then walked to Shui Rulan. Shui Rulan stood up and bowed sideways, but Qin Huayong reached out to stop her. Why is Rulan here? Qin Huayong asked. Something happened just now. First Miss Qi and Yuru quarreled again. Shui Rulan sat down again and sighed. I will deal with it. didn't you say you were not feeling well yesterday? Go back and have a rest first. I will ask Wanru about what happened just now. Qin Huayong said with concern. Shui Rulan looked at Qin Wanru, and Qin Wanru nodded silently. Then I will go to have a rest first. I am really tired. Shui Rulan stood up and said. Qianghua beside her hurriedly reached out to support her. She didn't feel it when she was nervous just now. Now when she relaxed, she immediately felt sore and weak all over. Goodbye, mother. Qin Wanru also bowed sideways to Shui Rulan. Shui Rulan supported her and looked at her. She wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. However, she didn't say anything. She just reached out to pat Qin Wanru's arm to comfort her and left with Qianghua. Wanru, sit down and talk. Qin Huayong had already sat down on the main seat, reached out to point at the chair beside him and said. Yes, father. Qin Wanru answered in a low voice, sat down in front of the chair beside her, and then held the handkerchief in her hand and lowered her head. After Yujie served tea again, she also stood behind Qin Wanru in a well-behaved manner, looking extremely well-behaved. Wanru, how did your elder sister fight with Miss Qi? Qin Huayong frowned and asked directly without beating around the bush. I don't know the details, but it was very noisy at that time. Mother wanted to ask about it, but then Miss Qi ran away, and big sister. Qin Wanru stopped here. Although she still lowered her head, her pale face could be vaguely seen. Yuru is getting more and more insensible now. Miss Qi has been living in the mansion for a while, so what if we let her have a little? Why did she make such a fuss? Wanru has been wronged. Qin Huayong said angrily. It's not that I feel wronged, but I have a question. It seemed that Qin Huayong's kind attitude made Qin Wanru a little bolder. She slightly raised her head and looked at Qin Huayong. Wanru, if you have something to say, just say it. I will definitely help you. Compared with your ignorant sister, Wanru is more sensible. Don't worry, I will punish her to copy the rules and precepts for women. She is a good girl, but not only did she quarrel with others, but she also rudely insulted her own sister. Qin Huayong said angrily. It could be seen that he was really annoyed. He slammed his hand on the table so hard that the teacups on the table jumped up and some tea overflowed. Qin Wanru glanced at Yujie, who hurriedly came forward with a rag and wiped the overflowing tea for Qin Huayong. At the same time, she took the teacup away and asked someone to make a new cup. Father. I am really not your biological daughter. Qin Wanru pulled the handkerchief and lowered her head again, looking very sad. How could she not be my biological daughter? I already told you that your sister is becoming more and more improper. She always quarrels with the young lady of the Qi family, and she even vents her anger on her own younger sister, Qin Huayong said angrily. His face turned green with anger. Seeing the blue veins on his forehead bulging, she knew that he was really angry. Seeing all this, Qin Wanru almost thought it was true. Father, why did my sister say so? Qin Wanru raised her eyes and asked with doubt, but she looked a little more relaxed than before. It seemed that she could still listen to what Qin Huayong said. Recently, she hasn't done anything good. I was so angry that I scolded her a few times and praised you. Maybe it's because she heard that I value you and don't value her, so she's a little jealous. Qin Huayong explained with a cold face. He increasingly felt that he had spoiled his eldest daughter too much. How could she say such words? He didn't know what Madame D had said to Qin Yuru in private, which made Qin Yuru say so. It seemed that it was about Madame D again. In the past, he thought that Madame D was a lady from a respectable family and behaved like a noble. Now he realized that Madame D was really not a good match. Will big sister tell others that I am not your biological daughter in the future? Qin Wanru seemed to believe it. She raised her head and looked at Qin Huayong. Her clear watery eyes seemed to be flowing with drops of water, clear and a little childlike affection. Wanru, don't worry. I will teach her a lesson. Qin Huayong calmed down a little and promised. But, in the recent banquet, if big sister tells others, what should we do? Qin Wanru stammered and twisted the handkerchief in her hand into a ball. It could be seen that she was really uneasy. The so-called banquet referred to the banquet of the Marquis's mansion of Fengyang. Madame D had decided not to go, but Qin Huayong felt it was not a good idea. Originally, he wanted to let Shui Rulan take his 2 daughters to the banquet, but now he saw Qin Wanru's timid and uneasy look. He felt that it was better to let Qin Yuru not go, otherwise, something might happen again. But if Qin Yuru did not go, there would be no one in the inner court who could talk to Duke Yong's mansion. Without Madame D and Qin Yuru, it would be very difficult for Countess Yong to take Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru to attend the banquet. Moreover, it was not very reasonable. After all, Duke Yong's mansion was Madame D's family. Wanru, don't worry. I will teach your big sister a lesson later. I will not let your big sister talk too much. It is the first time for her to attend a banquet, so people should feel that the misses of our Qin's mansion are harmonious. Qin Huayong comforted her in a soft voice. Qin Wanru blinked and had an idea. She knew that the banquet she mentioned was not the same as the one Qin Huayong mentioned. Then she could take this opportunity to tell them about Rui and Great Elder Princess. Father, are you talking about the banquet of the Marquis's mansion of Fengyang? Qin Wanru deliberately blinked and asked in confusion, I heard from my grandmother that Madame thought that we had better not go. How can we not go? Countess Yong is also your big sister's close relative. How can she say no? Since Madame D does not go, let your mother take you and Yuru there, and let your big sister tell her aunt. Qin Huayong thought that Qin Wanru was worried that Qin Yuru would say something again, so he comforted her, your big sister will not say that again. Father, when I went to Huaguang Temple that day, I met Rui and Great Elder Princess. She said that she likes me and said that she would send an invitation to the banquet. Qin Wanru bit her cherry lips and said softly. Rui and Great Elder Princess. Qin Huayong was stunned at first, and then he was overjoyed. Is it really Rui and Great Elder Princess? It's true. My mother also saw it and said that she would invite me and my mother. Qin Wanru said with a smile, and her delicate little face looked quite happy. That day, Great Elder Princess saw me with my mother, and said that my mother and I were destined to be together. Only you and your mother were invited? Qin Huayong's face darkened, and the smile slowly faded. Yes, Father, do you think we should go? Qin Wanru said hesitantly, and it seemed that she could not make up her mind, which was very suitable for a girl of her age. She had just arrived in the capital and was unfamiliar with the place and people, so she was naturally a little flustered. Only you and your mother. Qin Huayong glanced at Qin Wanru, and the last trace of doubt in his eyes disappeared. He frowned and tried his best to think about the feasibility of this matter. It was naturally a good thing that Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan could get the appreciation of Great Elder Princess. But if Shui Rulan went, but Madame D did not, would Duke Yong's mansion say anything? Father, do you mean that we should refuse? Qin Wanru said with a face full of doubts, then I will tell Nanny you later not to accept the invitation from Great Elder Princess's mansion. Don't, just accept it. Since Great Elder Princess appreciates you, you must go. Qin Huayong hurriedly reached out to stop them. Who dared to refuse the invitation from Great Elder Princess? Then why are you hesitating? Father, do you not want me to go with my mother? Qin Wanru blinked and asked confusedly. Not necessarily, or you can bring your big sister with you. Qin Huayong asked tentatively. I am afraid that Great Elder Princess will be angry if one more person comes. Qin Wanru said uneasily, and her eyes were a little wandering. Obviously, she did not know whether she was right or not. She would not take Qin Yuru with her, at least not Shui Rulan, and she would not let Qin Yuru go with the invitation from Qin's mansion. Originally, Qin Huayong would definitely agree to this matter, but after she stated the importance of Great Elder Princess, Qin Huayong would definitely consider her words carefully. And what Qin Yuru said today happened to be an opportunity. An opportunity to make Madame D compromise. Moreover, Shui Rulan would tell Qin Huayong that she was pregnant, and Qin Huayong would be more concerned about her. Then the two of you will go. After thinking about it, Qin Huayong felt that this was the only way, and it was not a difficult thing to do. Originally, he was afraid that Madame D would make trouble, but such a thing happened just now. Madame D talked nonsense, which made Yuru talk nonsense, and almost spoiled things. At this point, Madame D did not dare to make trouble. Thank you, father. Seeing that Qin Huayong did not have any doubts, Qin Wanru stood up and bowed to Qin Huayong happily, with a bright smile on her little face, and no grudge at all. Qin Huayong was relieved, and he increasingly felt that he was right to agree. Chapter 136. Come in. Qin Huayong said with a look of surprise. He was a little unsure at first. He was afraid that Rui and Great Elder Princess just said so casually, but he didn't expect that she would really come at this time. Qin Wanru's expression remained unchanged and she smiled, but she was also relieved in her heart. Before Rui and Great Elder Princess's invitation card came, she had already talked about this matter. If Rui and Great Elder Princess really forgot it, it would be troublesome. Fortunately, Rui and Great Elder Princess sent the invitation card as scheduled as in the last life. But this time, it was not sent to Madame D, nor was it stopped by Qin Yuru halfway. Yes. Nanny Yu came in respectfully and presented it to Qin Huayong with both hands. Qin Huayong took it and carefully looked at the gilded characters on it. He recognized that it was indeed Rui and Great Elder Princess's invitation card, and he couldn't help being overjoyed. He calmed himself down and hid a little smile on his face. He put the invitation card on the table and said, "It's an invitation card for the day after tomorrow. Since it is Rui and Great Elder Princess's intention, you and your mother will go there. But when you go there, you must listen to your mother. Whatever you say and do, you must follow your mother's order. Don't let others think that our Qin's mansion is impolite." Qin Huayong exhorted. Yes, father. Qin Wanru nodded obediently. As for your clothes, ask your mother to buy a few more sets of ready-made clothes for you tomorrow. Buy the best ones. The banquet at the Great Elder Princess residence will be attended by nobles. If they think that you're dressed shabbily, they will look down on you. Qin Huayong exhorted again. This matter was also a great thing for him. Those who were still wait-and-see about him would definitely think that he was relying on Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion, so his position would be quickly implemented. For a moment, he was overjoyed. After that, he didn't sit here for long. After thinking for a while, he felt that it was better to instruct Shui Rulan. After all, Qin Wanru was a child and didn't know many things. It would be better to instruct Shui Rulan. Qin Huayong left excitedly and went directly to Shui Rulan's Lufeng courtyard with his servant. Seeing Qin Huayong leave, Qin Wanru's joyful smile slowly faded and her face became calm again. She reached out to pick up the invitation card that Qin Huayong put on the table and read it carefully. In her previous life, she only saw this invitation card after the event, and it was only when Qin Yuru showed it off in front of her that she knew about it. In this life, from the point of receiving the invitation card, it was completely different from her previous life. Therefore, in this life, her ending could be better, and not a repeat of her previous life. Second miss, why does the general care so much? Nanny Yu had been in the mansion for a long time, so she could tell that Qin Huayong was pleasantly surprised. Yes, I am very happy. Father's life in the capital city is not easy now. Duke Yong's mansion must deliberately make things difficult for him. Qin Wanru's eyes were as calm as water, and she read the invitation again. Madame D had to let Shui Rulan marry into the mansion and let her be the housekeeper. Not only was Madame D unwilling, but also Duke Yong's mansion was unwilling. Madame of Qin Huayong was sure to find something to make things difficult for Qin Huayong. Madame D is so vicious to you. For the sake of Duke Yong's mansion, the general didn't divorce her. Nanny Yu said indignantly. My father won't divorce Madame D. Qin Wanru shook her head. She had always seen it clearly. From the last life to this life, Qin Huayong's tolerance could be seen everywhere. However, Madame D and Duke Yong's mansion couldn't do whatever they wanted to do. At least, there was one thing she suspected. If it was true, Qin Huayong would divorce Madame D at all costs. For Madame D, that was the only fatal point. But before that, it was impossible for Qin Huayong to divorce Madame D. Then miss, you should be more careful. Nanny Yu was worried. She seemed to have something on her mind and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Nanny Yu, is there anything else? Qin Wanru asked with a smile, knowing that Nanny Yu had something to say. It's nothing serious. It's just that my son sent me a message just now. I don't know if there's any change in that person's situation. I'm worried that something has happened. Nanny Yu lowered her voice and said after making sure there were no eyesores in the room. Nanny Yu, don't worry. It won't happen. That person has been sent away. Qin Wanru smiled. She knew that Nanny Yu was worried that something bad had happened to Wang Feng. You go out with Qing Yu later. I have something to ask Wang Feng to do. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said. A sick and weak figure flashed in her mind. According to the time, that person should not be sick and had not been pushed into the river. Originally, she wanted to ask Wang Feng to help her inquire about it. But Wang Feng could not leave before, so she had to put this matter aside for the time being. Yes, I got it. When Nanny Yu heard that Wang Feng was not in trouble, she heaved a sigh of relief and beamed with joy. Qin Wanru gave a few more orders to Qing Yu and asked her to follow Nanny Yu to see Wang Feng. Then she asked Yu Jie to invite the second housekeeper. This housekeeper was the one who was sent to the capital city early. He was in charge of the layout of the Qin's mansion and some of the furniture. Qin Wanru did not have enough power after all. It would be best if Qin Huayong could protect Shui Rulan. After the news of Shui Rulan's pregnancy spread, Madame D would be furious. Qin Wanru would guide Madame D appropriately and Qin Huayong would know how to protect Shui Rulan better. Not long after Nanny Yu and Qing Yu left, the whole mansion knew that Madame Shui was pregnant. Qin Huayong and old grandma were overjoyed. All the people in the mansion got a month's salary. For a moment, everyone in the mansion was very happy. Qin Huayong was not young. He had 2 daughters before. Not only Madame D, but also his 2 concubines did not have any children. Shui Rulan was pregnant not long after she entered the mansion. This was a good thing. Qin Huayong also gave the people in Shui Rulan's courtyard 2 more months' salary. The whole Qin's mansion was jubilant, except for Madame D's Yulan pavilion. Madame D was so angry that she smashed the porcelain in her room. Her original plan had not been carried out yet, but Shui Rulan had been confirmed to be pregnant. How could Madame D not be angry? Madam, don't be too angry. We have a backup plan, a backup plan. Nanny Zhou was afraid that Madame D would really rush to Shui Rulan's room, so she reached out to stop her and said hurriedly. Madame D was so angry that her face turned pale. Her eyes showed a bit of ferocity. She bit her silver teeth tightly on the corner of her lips, which turned white. Nanny Zhou, I won't let this bitch get what she wants. Madam, I understand. I understand. You can't act rashly now. Otherwise, if something happens to Madame Shui in the future, the general will think of you first. What you should do now is to congratulate her. Nanny Zhou pulled Madame D to the chair and sat down. She poured a cup of tea for her and put it in front of her. Madam, you should have a good rest. This time, you have to behave like others. I can't accept it. Madame D clenched her teeth and there was a fierce look in her eyes. She sat in the room full of porcelain and clenched her fists tightly. Madam, you shouldn't act like this now. You have to remember that it's just a temporary happiness. Didn't you just imply that you can let First Miss take them to the banquet? If something happens at the banquet, it has nothing to do with you. You can bear with it for a while, and then you will be cleared of suspicion. Nanny Zhou tried her best to persuade her again. These words finally made Madame D calm down again. The plan she had discussed with Nanny Zhou before was carried out in the Marquis's mansion of Fengyang. The Marquis's mansion of Fengyang was not Duke Yang's mansion, and she happened to not go there. As long as she told her sister-in-law, she would not be blamed if something happened. Okay, I will bear with it. Madame D said gloomily. She could bear with it for a few days. Take a set of headwear from my jewelry box later. It's not expensive and not cheap. Just tell her that I want to congratulate her. Yes, Madame should do this. I will go later. Seeing Madame D who had calmed down, Nanny Zhou smiled. Have you found the coachman? Madame D suddenly remembered what she had asked Nanny Zhou to do and asked. I think it has something to do with Nanny Yu's son. I also found her son guarding in a yard and didn't come out. I don't know if he passed by or something really happened in the yard. I want to find a suitable opportunity to ask someone to rush in and have a look. Nanny Zhou said. She had searched every corner of the mansion and found nothing unusual. She thought it was most likely that Wang Feng, Nanny Yu's son, had followed Nanny Yu to the capital city, but she rarely saw him in the mansion. She didn't know what he was busy with almost all the time. After asking someone to keep an eye on him, they found that he entered a yard and didn't come out again. However, the person sent by Nanny Zhou didn't know if there was only one door leading to the outside in this yard, or maybe Wang Feng just passed by and entered from here and came out from the other side. So they didn't do anything and waited for Nanny Zhou's order. Nanny Zhou was also not sure. She didn't dare to act rashly, so she asked someone to keep an eye on him and find a suitable opportunity. Ask my mother to find a few people to find a reason to rush in and have a look. Madame D ordered. That's a great idea, Madame. Nanny Zhou nodded repeatedly and immediately clapped her hands. In this way, even if there was a mistake, Madame D would have nothing to do with it. Ask someone to change a new batch of porcelain. Madame D glanced at the broken pieces on the ground. Madame, what should I say? Nanny Zhou hesitated for a while and said. Everyone in the mansion was happily celebrating Shui Rulan's pregnancy and hoped that there would be a new young master in the mansion. Madame D smashing things in the room was totally different from the virtuous and magnanimous attitude she showed now. At this time, she should be more gentle and decent, and show that she was happier and cared more than Shui Rulan. Just say that I heard the good news about her and was excited to come over to congratulate her. But I accidentally knocked over the antique shelf and smashed the porcelain on it. Madame D said indifferently. Nanny Zhou hesitated for a moment but still nodded. This kind of thing was not a big deal. She just needed to find a reason to cover it up. Who would really take this point to talk about it? Nanny Zhou didn't want to let go of this matter. She just needed to find a reason to cover it up. Nanny Zhou had been serving Madame D for a long time. She had always been Madame D's confidant and also a cunning person. But this time, she obviously miscalculated. Chapter 137. When Qin Wanru arrived at Shui Rulan's Lufeng courtyard, Qin Huayong was still there. Hearing that Qin Wanru came to congratulate her, he smiled and waved his hand to let Qin Wanru come in. After Qin Wanru entered the door, she first congratulated Qin Huayong and Shui Rulan, and then sat down on a chair on one side. Wanru, you can go to the street to pick clothes tomorrow. Your mother needs more rest. Qin Huayong said with a smile. He looked glorious and relaxed, and he was in a good mood. Cousin, I'm fine. I can accompany Wanru to pick clothes and some jewelry. She is just a child. What does she know? Shui Rulan said with a gentle smile. You are always so worried. Wanru is an adult now. Qin Huayong's always determined face showed some concern and gentleness. When he glanced at Shui Rulan's belly, his eyes became more gentle. This look was almost completely different from his usual look. It could be seen that he was really happy. Cousin, I'm really fine. Shui Rulan smiled and gently wiped her mouth with a handkerchief. Madam D sent Nanny Zhou to congratulate you. Qianghua came in with a happy face to report. Shui Rulan was pregnant, and the whole Lufeng courtyard was in a very good mood. Shui Rulan turned to look at Qin Huayong, hesitated for a moment, and said nothing. Let her come in. Qin Huayong said with a smile. He turned to look at Shui Rulan, lowered his voice, and reached out to touch her hand on the table to comfort her. He said, since she wants to make up with you, you don't have to care too much about the past. Without her, you and I, Shui Rulan blushed and lowered her head, looking gentle and well-behaved. Thinking that they were in harmony in the backyard now, Qin Huayong smiled more. He was worried that Madame D would throw a tantrum later. Now he thought that Madame D was also a miss from a big aristocratic family, and she had learned these female precepts and female rules well. Qin Wanru glanced at Shui Rulan. She sat on the side of Shui Rulan, saw Shui Rulan's blushing face, and also saw Shui Rulan slightly lowered her head to hide the shame and anger in her eyes. He knew that Shui Rulan was angry. At that time, she just wanted to stay in the backyard of Qin's mansion quietly and serve Madame Dowager to live a peaceful life. She didn't have any improper thoughts. Now hearing Qin Huayong's words, it seemed that she already wanted to hook up with Qin Huayong at that time, so she felt that she could marry into Qin's mansion because of Madame D. This was a humiliation to Shui Rulan. She frowned slightly and glanced at Qin Huayong's face. Her father's words were really unpleasant. But it could also be seen that Madame D had a high position in his father's heart. Nanny Zhou came in under the guidance of a servant girl. When she saw Qin Huayong, she increasingly felt that Madame's move was good and could refresh the general's good impression. She took 2 steps forward respectfully, bowed to Qin Huayong and Shui Rulan respectively, and then handed the jewelry box in her hand to them. Madame Shui, our madam heard that you have good news, so she was excited and wanted to come to see you. Unexpectedly, she was in a hurry and knocked over the antique shelf in the corner, smashing all the porcelain on the shelf. Madam was accidentally hurt, so it's not convenient for her to come to see Madame Shui. Sister, are you hurt? Although Shui Rulan didn't quite believe this, she still had to show concern on the surface and raised her head to ask. She was more willing to believe that Madame D heard her good news and smashed all the porcelain on the shelf in anger. Our madam is fine. It's not a big deal. She just feels it's a pity that she can't come to see Madame Shui, so she specially ordered me to come here to send a gift for Madame. This is the best set of Madame's jewelry, and I hope Madame Shui will accept it. Nanny Zhou said smoothly. He was all smiles and seemed to be in a very good mood. This made Qin Huayong very satisfied, and he didn't care so much about Madame D's carelessness. Ask the steward of the mansion to mend the porcelain later. Your madam is really too careless. Qin Huayong casually ordered without caring. Yes, I know, I will order later. Hearing Qin Huayong's order, Nanny Zhou bowed again and again. I have seen the antique shelf in Madame's room before. It's a very big one, and there are many antique porcelain placed in it. It looks very noble. Such a big antique shelf must have fallen with a lot of force. I don't know if there are any servant girls injured except Mother. Qin Wanru asked with concern. It's okay. The servant girls happened to be not around, and no one was injured except Madame. Nanny Zhou's smile flickered, but she still answered cleverly. Such a big antique shelf fell down, how could no one be hurt at all? But she couldn't find anyone to say that anyone was hurt, so she could only vaguely put the blame on Madame D. Then, should we ask a doctor to have a look? Qin Wanru asked and turned to Qin Huayong. Father, Madam is hurt, and we have to send someone to have a look. Otherwise, if something really happened, it would be troublesome. The antique shelf in Madame D's room was indeed very big, and there were always servants serving Madame D. Such a big thing fell down, but it just happened that only Madame D was hurt. Her words reminded Qin Huayong, and his eyes darkened. He looked at Nanny Zhou suspiciously, which made her heart tremble. She was afraid that Qin Huayong would find out something. Then ask a doctor to have a look. Qin Huayong said in a low voice. This, General, we'd better not. It's really not a big deal. Madam is just a little scratched, and now the medicine has been applied. I heard that it is a medicine made with secret medicine in the palace, and old grandma of Duke Yong's mansion specially left it for First Miss. Hearing that they really wanted to ask a doctor, Nanny Zhou hurriedly shook her hands. How could Madame D have an injury? If they really checked, Qin Wanru and Madam's words would be exposed. How can we not see a doctor when she is hurt? Nanny Zhou, you are also confused. Come, let's go and see Madam together. She only said that it was okay, but Qin Wanru looked nervous, as if she was really worried about Madame D, and she also stood up. Nanny Zhou suddenly felt that what Madame D said might be true. Was Second Miss becoming more and more intelligent? Otherwise, how could such a petite Second Miss know so much? General, the second steward wants to see you. It's about Madame D's Yulon pavilion. Before they came to a decision, the servant who guarded the door hurriedly came in and reported. His words made everyone in the room quiet. Nanny Zhou looked here and there, and had a bad feeling in her heart. She involuntarily stepped back. And stepped back. Nanny Zhou, be careful. A servant girl's low voice came from behind. Nanny Zhou looked back, and she was so angry that she almost slapped the smiling face in front of her. When did Yu Jie stand behind her? Now it was impossible for her to retreat to the side silently. Let him in. Qin Huayong frowned and said in a low voice. There were no outsiders here, so there was no need to avoid. As the steward of the inner court, Shui Rulan would often meet the second steward in the future. As for Qin Wanru, in Qin Huayong's eyes, she was really too small. Yes. The servant answered and left. After a while, he came in with a man in his 50s or 60s. This was the second steward of the mansion. At this moment, he looked angry, and it was obvious that there was something wrong. What happened? After the second steward bowed, Qin Huayong asked. General, Madame D smashed all the porcelain in the room, but she said that she knocked them over accidentally. How could it be possible that there is no porcelain in the room? Although there are many porcelain on the antique shelf, some porcelain in this room is not on the shelf. How could Madame D knock all of them? The second steward said angrily. The reason why he was so angry was that he had been angry with Madame D, and now he had to go to Qin Huayong to complain. What do you mean by smashing all of them? Qin Huayong frowned and didn't understand what the second steward meant. General, when decorating Madame D's yard, I was afraid that the decoration was not good, so I specially decorated it better. I didn't expect that all the porcelain in the room was smashed. I don't know why Madame D smashed them. After smashing them, she asked me to bring some new good things. But when I brought them to her, she was not happy and smashed some of them. How could there be such good things at this time? The second steward said angrily. Madame D smashed them herself. Qin Huayong's face darkened. General, it was not Madame D who smashed them. It must be his words that made Madame D angry, so there was a dispute. Let me go back and ask Madame D clearly, and then I will give you an answer. Seeing Qin Huayong's face, Nanny Zhou had to come out and said with a smile, but she couldn't help complaining in her heart. She didn't expect that Madame D would bring the matter to Qin Huayong again. Now, what she had done before was in vain. Qin Wanru quietly turned her eyes to Nanny Zhou. Looking at Nanny Zhou's expression, her eyes became deep. Before, Qin Wanru sent someone to remind the second steward on behalf of Shui Rulan. In fact, it was not too much intervention. Now Shui Rulan was in charge of the inner court. Moreover, Shui Rulan was pregnant at this time, and the general now held her in high regard. It was reasonable for Qin Wanru, as a daughter, to manage some small affairs for her mother. And the most important thing was that Madame D's yard was the most gorgeous one, which was much better than Shui Rulan's yard. Qin Wanru asked the second steward to help Shui Rulan to decorate the same yard, and the second steward was directly dumbfounded. When he just came to the capital city, he really wanted to please Madame D. In the end, what crushed the deputy steward was that there were several pieces of porcelain in Madame D's room, which belonged to old grandma. She originally wanted to put them in her room, but unexpectedly, the deputy steward went to please Madame D. If these porcelain disappeared inexplicably, the second steward couldn't bear the responsibility, so he brought the matter to Qin Huayong. "General, those porcelain are the best in the mansion, and some even belong to old grandma. Now I can't find items of the same value to decorate Madame D's room, so Madame D got angry and scolded me for hiding them. I dare not say more, but just looked at the situation in Madame D's room and reported it to the general," the second steward said angrily. He had been working in Qin's mansion for a long time, and he had always been with Qin Huayong, so he knew what was the most appropriate words at this time. There were even old grandma's things. Qin Huayong snorted coldly, and his tone became more and more serious, like the depression of the storm. "Did Madame D break it herself?" "I saw it. It should be smashed." "If it was an accident, it was impossible for all the porcelain in the room to be broken," the second steward said with certainty. Chapter 138. Madame D didn't expect that Qin Huayong would be alerted by her act of smashing a room full of porcelain. Qin Huayong looked at the porcelain on the floor, and then looked at the antique shelf that was still standing there neatly. There was not even a trace of movement on the floor. How could Qin Huayong not understand? His eyes were burning with anger, and without another word, he turned around and left. What did she mean by accidentally bumping into the antique shelf? It was obvious that Madame D hated Madame Shui for being pregnant, so she made such a scene. "General, General!" Madame D panicked. She suddenly stood up and rushed out. Qin Huayong suddenly stopped and turned around. He looked at Madame D fiercely and said, "Whether you are happy or not, if anything happens to the child in Rulan's belly, you will be the first one to blame." "General! General!" Madame D held the door frame and didn't dare to take another step. She suddenly covered her face and burst into tears. "General, how could you say such a thing? Although I am a little uncomfortable, how could I hurt Sister Shui? If I didn't hurt my body when I gave birth to Yuru, I wouldn't only have Yuru now." Qin Huayong also knew that Madame D had a difficult labor when she gave birth to Qin Yuru. It was not easy for Qin Yuru to be born. She also hurt her body, so it would be difficult for her to get pregnant again. Madam, don't be sad. General was just saying. He didn't really doubt you. Don't cry." Nanny Zhou ran over to help Madame D up. She peeped at Qin Huayong and said softly, "Life in General's mansion wasn't very good at that time. Madam, your body was not well. Otherwise, such a thing wouldn't have happened. General is very kind. He never blamed you for so many years." She meant that the reason why Madame D couldn't get pregnant was because of Qin Huayong. Qin Huayong looked coldly at Madame D who was crying. He didn't say anything for a while. After standing still for a while, he finally turned around and left. Seeing Qin Huayong standing there, Mrs. Qin, who had some hope, cried and fell to the ground. Nanny, how could he do this to me? I hurt my body because of him. He used to say that he didn't care about children, but why did he do this to me now? Madam, don't be sad. The general just forgot the past for a while. He still cares about you. Otherwise, he wouldn't come to see you. Nanny Zhou held Madame D tightly and winked at the maid, Maya. Maya understood and came over to help her bring Madame D into the inner room. After Madame D was settled on the bed, Nanny Zhou said in a low voice, "Madam, don't cry. I feel strange. I've been gone for a while. Why haven't you cleaned this place? You even had a conflict with the deputy steward. Don't you know that the deputy steward works for the general?" Nanny Zhou suspected that someone was stirring up trouble here. When she left, she told Madame to stay here and not to stir up trouble at this time. "I just want to exchange for a batch of presentable porcelain. They sent me all the junk that others don't want. If people see this, I will lose my face." Madame D wiped her tears and said with hatred. "Did Madame call the deputy steward yourself?" Nanny Zhou asked helplessly. "If I didn't call him, he wouldn't give me a good one." "My good madam, why are you still making trouble at this time? If something really happens to Madame Shui, the general will definitely suspect you." Nanny Zhou said. "That won't do. This bastard can't be allowed to stay." Madame D gritted her teeth and said with hatred. "Madam, you must be more careful during this time and be more kind to Madame Shui. This is not before Madame Shui is pregnant. If you really hurt Madame Shui, the general will definitely not let you go." Nanny Zhou pointed outside and hinted, "Wait for the banquet." "Okay, then wait for the banquet." Madame D fiercely narrowed her eyes and her eyes were cold. Even if she didn't attend the banquet, she could cooperate with her sister-in-law to give Shui Rulan an accident. In Fengyang, the accident that happened in the Marquis' mansion couldn't be blamed on her. "Madam, do you still need the people over there?" Nanny Zhou felt that they still had to be prepared. She reminded Madame D and pointed in a direction. The people over there happened to be entering the capital city. Madame D had already contacted the people over there under Nanny Zhou's reminder. Both of them hit it off. "Yes, they are taking the imperial examination and will enter the capital city. It's a waste not to use them. Shui Rulan wants to be the madam of Qin's mansion peacefully. She doesn't know how clean she is." Madame D sneered and said, "It's just a little more money. But don't act rashly. Wait until Shui Rulan comes back from the banquet of the Marquis' mansion of Fengyang alive." "Yes, I understand. I will send someone to tell her tomorrow." Nanny Zhou understood tacitly. Qin Wanru followed Shui Rulan to the street market in the capital city early the next morning. Last time when she went to Huaguang Temple, she and Shui Rulan walked on the road in a hurry without stopping. The weather was good. Both of them were in the mood now. They simply parked the carriage on a street and took a few people with them to walk along the crowd casually. They walked on a main road in the capital city. There were many people. Qin Wanru not only took Yujie but also Nanny Dong. Nanny Dong liked a shop, and Qin Wanru happened to want to see it herself, so she took Nanny Dong out. A group of people walked and stopped along the way. They talked and laughed, so they didn't feel that time passed very fast. Neither Shui Rulan nor Qin Wanru wore a curtain hat. Qin Wanru looked like a child. Shui Rulan had never worn a curtain hat and had the habit of dropping her veil. There were many misses from aristocratic families coming and going on the street. There were not many people wearing veils. Therefore, they were not conspicuous. Walking to the door of a tea house, Shui Rulan reached out to touch her belly. She had walked a lot along the way, and she was really tired. Qin Wanru looked at the door number and said to Shui Rulan, "Mother, you go up and have a rest first. I will go to a few more shops to see the place that Nanny Dong chose for me." "I'd better go with you," Shui Rulan said with a little worry. "Mother, I'm really fine. Besides, Nanny Dong is here. You can have a rest here first." Qin Wanru refused with a smile. "If something happens, send someone to call me." Shui Rulan was still a little worried. She told her a few more words and then took her into the tea house. Qin Wanru followed Nanny Dong and continued to move forward. After walking for a short distance, they saw a shop in front of them. The shop was not big, and it was also an embroidery workshop. However, it looked deserted and few people came in and out. It was completely different from the prosperous shops they had seen along the way. The plaque at the door was also dusty and dirty. It seemed that no one had cleaned it for a long time. At first glance, it made people unhappy. "Miss, this is the shop. I've asked about it. I heard that the owner of this shop is going to leave the capital city. He said that something happened at home, and the business here is going to be closed." Nanny Dong pointed to the shop and said. Qin Wanru looked around. There were also some shops on the left and right, and there was even a restaurant on the side. It was a 3-story restaurant. The guests coming and going were either rich or noble. They were all dressed in bright clothes and ostentatiously passed by. However, no one stopped to look at this shop. In such a prosperous area, the owner of this shop opened a shop like this. Did he really not want to do business? "Let's go in and have a look," Qin Wanru said and walked into the shop. After entering the door, she saw that there were a lot of goods in the shop. Many brocades were piled on the board in disorder. At first glance, she could tell that they were not good things. Several women were looking through the brocades, and they did not look at those brocades that were obviously much cheaper than those in other shops. After looking through a few times, they shook their heads and left. "Miss, they are all women from ordinary families. Even if these brocades are the best, they are not suitable for them. Even if some of them are greedy and buy some for cheap, the quantity is very small." Nanny Dong observed several women coming and going and whispered in Qin Wanru's ear. Qin Wanru withdrew her eyes from those women and nodded. There were not many shop assistants in the shop. There were only 3, and they all looked a little old. They were not very smart, and she didn't know if it was because of the slow business. They all looked a little lazy. "Second miss, there are more upstairs." Nanny Dong pointed up and said. Qin Wanru saw a small staircase in an inconspicuous corner. She walked over and stepped on the wooden steps. Because it was in the corner, it felt a little gray. When she went up to the second floor, she felt that there was some light again. However, because the window was not big, it seemed too narrow and a little stuffy. There were some accessories on the second floor, which were some very common toggle and loop buttons, embroidery and so on. She didn't know if it was because the light upstairs was not very good, but it looked gray and very inconspicuous. There were a few scattered chairs by the window, which seemed to be intended for people to sit down and have a look. A lot of embroidery was piled up in the form of a pile of rubbish, which was really not a pleasing place. "Second miss, please wait a moment. I'll go and invite them over," Nanny Dong said. Qin Wanru decided to meet the owner of this shop before she came today. Nanny Dong also went out yesterday and told this matter to the supervisor here. "Okay." Qin Wanru nodded, picked up a piece of embroidery from the ground, and put it in the window to look at. In fact, it was very beautiful embroidery. It was not only exquisite, but also made of good materials. The sunlight fell on the embroidery from the window, as if it was plated with a layer of light gold, which was extremely gorgeous. Something seemed to flash in her mind, but she couldn't grasp it for a while. Qin Wanru frowned slightly, thought for a while, put down the embroidery at hand, and picked up a pair of embroidery to look at. "Miss, this embroidery is so beautiful." Yujie also took one and looked at it with Qin Wanru. She used to live in Jingshin Monastery and usually saw the gray monk's robe. At this time, when she saw such exquisite and beautiful embroidery, she immediately liked it and couldn't help sighing with emotion. "It's fine. Miss, I think this is the most beautiful embroidery I've seen. How many have you seen in the monastery before?" Qin Wanru laughed, and handed the other embroidery in her hand to Yujie. "Look at it, which one looks better?" Miss, you can't look down on me. Although I haven't worn it myself, I've seen it. There were many pilgrims in Jingshin Monastery at that time, and many misses and madams wore very gorgeous clothes. Yujie took it and pouted, and then compared it. She took out the one she had seen before and said with certainty, Miss, this one looks better. Chapter 139. Nanny Dong came over with two people. Walking in front was a little old man who looked like a steward. Following behind him was a young man dressed in white, his appearance extraordinary and elegant. He was tall and straight like a slender bamboo. What was most noticeable about him was his pair of handsome eyes, which were smiling, revealing a kind of elegance and gentleness that came from his bones. But inexplicably, she felt that he should not be underestimated. Different from the harmless elegance that Chu Luchen occasionally hinted, he looked more leisurely, and his heart should be more tranquil. When there was a smile in his starry eyes, it always made people feel warm. Most of the warmth she felt after she came to the capital city in her last life was given by him. But it was also because of him that she became a widow, and finally became an abandoned woman who was driven out of Deputy Prime Minister's mansion. If Chi Baiyu did not recommend her to be a painter in the palace and draw pictures for the beauties, she would not be able to return to her maiden family, and her husband's family would not take her in. Finally, she could only live on the street. But even so, Qin Wanru was still grateful to him. At least in the few months when he was alive, he treated her very well. He taught her medicine, taught her how to raise a swallow, taught her how to let go of the knot in her heart, and taught her how to smile slowly. However, all of this disappeared after he died. This person had brought her a warm light, but it had completely disappeared with his death. After that, she was miserably chased out of the left minister's residence. Why was she chased out? That part of her memory was very vague. Some things in her past life seemed to be blocked by something. She could never remember them, and it seemed that she was reprimanded because of her color. Subconsciously, she reached out to touch her head, which was dull and painful, very uncomfortable. She was very grateful to him, and also hoped that she could save him before he got hurt. This was even her original intention of learning medicine. In her last life, he was both a teacher and a friend. How could she not be excited when she saw him again in this life? Excuse me, miss, are you the one who wants to buy the shop? When Shichi stood in front of Qin Wanru and said with a gentle smile. Although there was a little surprise in his eyes, he still smiled politely. He didn't ignore Qin Wanru because of her small age. He also glanced at her overly delicate face calmly and alienated. You're so young. When she finally calmed down, Qin Wanru stood up and bowed deeply to Wen Shichi respectfully. She raised her pale little face and smiled brightly. It was beautiful and brilliant. That's right. Please sit. Wen Shichi looked at Qin Wanru curiously, looked her up and down, and then reached out his hand to gesture with a smile. Although she was young, she was calm and delicate. Although her face looked pale at this time, with her fresh cherry lips, she was inexplicably stunning. One could imagine how stunning a girl like her would be when she grew up. What was even rarer was that she was so outstanding. Even her slightly raised eyebrows had a natural charm, but her appearance was decent and steady. At first glance, one could tell that she came from a well-educated aristocratic family. Her brilliant smile, without a trace of scheming, inexplicably made people feel good about her. As the youngest son of Prime Minister Zhou, Wen Shichi had seen many misses from aristocratic families, but it seemed that no one was as eye-catching as her. Child, are you going to sell this shop? Qin Wanru suppressed the shock in her heart and said slowly. In her last life, she did not know that Wen Shichi had such a shop. However, she really did not know anything except for Wen Shichi, who entered Prime Minister Zhu's mansion in the name of marriage. Otherwise, she would not be driven out of the house in the end. When she married into the family, Wen Shichi had been bedridden and could not get up. He rarely woke up every day, and then he did not wake up for several days and nights. In the end, he did not live long and died at a young age. To Qin Wanru, he was more like a brother. When he was awake, he took good care of Qin Wanru. When he taught Qin Wanru, he was gentle and kind, and he never gave her a hard time because she didn't understand. He was born smart and quick-witted. Compared with him, Qin Wanru was far behind him. Even so, he never called her stupid. His illness was caused by falling into the water. Qin Wanru asked Wang Feng to find him that day. She must think of a way to remind him to pay attention to that couple. She must not let him die early, although he was smarter than others, like in her last life. She bit her lip, and a trace of tears flashed in her eyes. Her bright and beautiful eyes became more and more attractive. When Shichi looked at Qin Wanru in surprise, he felt that the miss in front of him seemed to be very excited to see him. She looked like she was about to cry. Her small cherry lips were tightly pressed together. Although she suppressed all her emotions, there was a trace of thick ink rolling in her beautiful eyes, and her beautiful eyes were wet. Had he seen this miss before? When Shichi denied it after thinking for a while. It was impossible for him to have seen this Mississippi. If he had seen this miss before, it was impossible for him not to have an impression of such an outstanding girl. It's not me. It's a friend of mine. He happened to have something to do and asked me to negotiate the price with you, Mississippi, when Shichi smiled gently and said, I heard that we have talked about the price yesterday. What do you think, miss? Nanny Dong did ask about the price yesterday. Today, Qin Wanru came to see the shop before making a decision. How to deal with the brocade and embroidery inside. Qin Wanru composed herself and said slowly. She casually picked up the embroidery at her feet. When Shichi was very smart, she could not let him see anything. If you want, of course, we can also deal with them together. When Shichi smiled and said, Can't we share the shop together? Qin Wanru asked with a smile. When she raised her head again, all the emotions in her eyes had been restrained. No, these brocades and embroideries are excellent. It's just that the store hasn't been tidied up properly, and we haven't come up with a reasonable way to attract customers. That's why this place is deserted. My friend doesn't care about the business of the store, so the good things have been reduced to this state. When Shichi said unhurriedly, Didn't you say you want to go back to your hometown? Qin Wanru blinked her big bright eyes and asked in confusion. Originally, I planned to return to my hometown, but then I decided not to go. However, my friend doesn't like this kind of embroidery shop. Since someone wants it, I want to sell it. That's why the price is so low. Originally, I planned to sell it after a period of time. Since your subordinate asked me, I naturally told him my intention. When Shichi said with a smile and explained the cause and effect in a few words. So, it was not only cheap, but also coincidental. Looking at the embroidery all over the floor, Qin Wanru really felt it was a pity. Maybe the shop was run by a man and he didn't care about these goods, so he didn't manage them well, so the shop could not be opened. She was very envious of the embroidery and brocade in front of her. Since he planned to open such a shop, he naturally needed to buy a batch of brocade and embroidery. In fact, it was best to sell them together with the shop. Then, can we not pay for them together? Qin Wanru counted the money she had at hand and found that she didn't have so much money. It was enough to pay for one shop, and there would be some circulating funds later. However, if she wanted to buy such a batch of goods, she would be a little short of money. However, she didn't want to bother Madame Dowager and her mother. The mansion was also looking for a shop, and Madame Dowager and her mother didn't have much circulating funds. No. The price is very low. My friend naturally wants to sell them together. Even if it is cheaper, at least it will save a lot of trouble. When Shichi said with a smile. Qin Wanru bit her lower lip, and a layer of white appeared on her pink lips. Her beautiful eyes fell somewhere in the air, and it could be seen that she was thinking about the feasibility of this plan. When Shichi's eyes fell on her face again. When Qin Wanru looked at him just now, he was embarrassed to look back at her. Now that Qin Wanru was in a trance, he could see her face more clearly. The girl in front of him was indeed extremely beautiful. Her delicate facial features carried a hint of childishness, and it was hard to describe in painting or calligraphy. She was very much like those floating and agile beauties in ancient books, but she was brighter and more beautiful than them. Childishness, otherworldly, and charm seemed to be intertwined in her body, which made people couldn't help but look at her a few more times. She was really a beautiful girl. With pure appreciation, Wen Shiqi looked at Qin Wanru a few more times, and then he lowered his eyes politely with a smile on his face. If his close friends saw that he would secretly look at a girl one day, they might be surprised and teased. His close friends all said that if he continued to be like this, he could directly become a monk. If you really don't have money, there is a bank across the street, and you can mortgage the shop. When he raised his head again, Wen Shiqi smiled gently again. His words reminded Qin Wanru. Her eyes lit up, and her tightly biting lips relaxed. She rolled her watery eyes and said, "Okay, then it's settled. I will pay for the shop first, and then buy the things in the shop with the money I get from the mortgage. But because it is a one-time payment, you can buy the things in the shop to me at half price. In this way, your friend can be saved from trouble, right?" "Okay." Wen Shiqi suddenly felt very appreciative of the girl in front of him, so he agreed casually. Originally, he only thought that she was beautiful, but he didn't expect that she was so smart and decisive. She could grasp the weaknesses revealed in other people's words when talking, and hit the nail on the head, so people had to consider her proposal. If it was a man, he couldn't help but make friends with him. Unfortunately, it was a woman. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said, "Then 5 days later, I will come to buy the shop with money, but I still have to trouble you. I don't know if you can be my guarantor, so that I can raise money faster." She was not familiar with the people and the place in the capital, and it was not so easy to mortgage the shop. In fact, she didn't know much about the twists and turns in it, but she knew that if Wen Shiqi could be her guarantor, the effect would be faster and better. Wen Shiqi frowned. He originally wanted to refuse, but when he saw the pair of dark watery eyes, he froze for a moment and raised his handsome eyebrows. In fact, he was not very willing to do it, but he couldn't bring himself to say it when he looked into her eyes. If you really can't find anyone else, I can ask my friend to be your guarantor," Wen Shiqi said slowly. He never liked to meddle in other people's business, so it was best to ask his friend to do it. What if he doesn't want to?" Qin Wanru asked eagerly. "If he doesn't want to, I will be your guarantor." Wen Shiqi thought for a while and said indifferently, but it could be seen that he was reluctant. "Thank you, child. May I know your name?" Qin Wanru stood up happily and bowed slightly to Wen Shiqi. When she raised her head again, there was a bright smile in her eyes. At that moment, the smile touched the calm heart of the teenager. Chapter 140. Why did he find it difficult to refuse her? He even had the idea that they should know each other. Wen Shiqi clearly realized that this feeling was definitely not love at first sight. After all, she was still too young, and his heart had always been calm. Even the abbot of the temple said that with his state of mind, he could directly become a monk. But why did he have a feeling of déjà vu? He nodded silently, and his eyes under his handsome eyebrows became deep. When Qin Wanru went back to find Shui Rulan had rested for a while. Seeing that it was almost time, they didn't go back to the mansion. Instead, they went out of the tea house and found a restaurant to have lunch outside. A waiter had been waiting at the door for a long time. Seeing them coming, he was very perceptive and hurried upstairs. They found a private room by the window and enjoyed the scenery while enjoying the scenery, which was very comfortable. Qin Wanru had met Wen Shiqi and forced him to be her guarantor, so she was relieved. At least they knew each other now. When she asked him to pay attention to those two people in the future, she could also implicitly say it. As long as she found a suitable time to say it, he would not die young again in this life. With his talent and learning, if it were not for his illness, he would definitely be able to compete in the court and become a dragon or phoenix among men. With her worries gone, she looked much more relaxed. After eating a little, she stopped eating and leaned on the window to watch the fun. The window was hung with gauze, so people could not see the inside from the outside, but they could see the scenery outside from the inside. Although it was a little hazy, it was still very attractive to the misses from aristocratic families. In the last life, Qin Wanru almost didn't go out. On the one hand, people gossiped about her wherever she went. On the other hand, she became more and more self-abased and almost couldn't raise her head in front of others. Every time she went out, she would be ridiculed and ridiculed. Even the misses who were close to her deliberately ridiculed her in front of others. In this life, when she went to the streets of the capital, she could lean on the window to watch the scenery outside. Not only did she dare to come out, but she also took the initiative to come out. Shui Rulan ate a little slowly. Seeing Qin Wanru leaning on the window, she felt funny and pitiful. She put down the chopsticks in her hand and her eyes turned red. This child was so happy to watch the fun. In fact, she was just at the age to watch the fun. "Mother, if you're done, let's go back." Hearing the voice behind her, Qin Wanru turned around and saw Shui Rulan wiping her mouth. She turned around from the chair and sat down obediently. If it weren't for her bright eyes, he wouldn't have believed that the young girl sitting in front of him was the one who had been so rude as to lean against the window. "Let's watch for a while longer," Shui Rulan said with a smile. "Mother, I'm tired. Let's go back." Qin Wanru came over, held Shui Rulan's hand, and shook it gently. "Well, I will take you out next time." Shui Rulan knew that she was afraid that she would be tired, so she took Qin Wanru's hand and promised. "Thank you, Mother." Qin Wanru nodded with a smile. They came out of the private room and were about to go downstairs when they suddenly heard a young man's voice. "Second Miss Qin." Qin Wanru subconsciously looked back and saw Chu Liuxin coming out of the private room next to her. She couldn't help but be stunned, but after bowing to him sideways, she followed Shui Rulan obediently and walked downstairs with the help of her servant girl. She didn't stop at all. "Ah. I." Chu Liuxin stretched out his hand and blinked his eyes, looking very innocent. "Prince Xian, which family's daughter is she from? She is so beautiful." Several teenagers who came with him also saw the scene in front of them. They looked at Chu Liuxin and then at Qin Wanru's back and became curious. "Although she is beautiful, she is so small." Someone said. "She is so small. She looks less than 10 years old, but she is very polite. Which family's daughter is she from?" All the teenagers were very curious. Some of them didn't see her just now and deliberately stretched their necks to look out. But at this time, Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan had already gone far away. Chu Liuxin was a little unhappy. He felt that at least when he was in Jiangzhou, he and Qin Wanru were familiar friends. How could they see her without saying hello? It was so rude. "Let's go." Chu Liuxin turned around angrily. He was in a bad mood and didn't want to talk. He squinted at the teenagers who followed him, shook his feet and went downstairs. When he saw this girl next time, he must scare her. Let's see if she dared not to give him face in front of so many people. Early the next morning, Yujia woke Qin Wanru up early. After breakfast and freshening up, she took Yujia to Madame Dowager's yard. Madame Dowager had finished her breakfast, and Shui Rulan was accompanying her. When she saw Qin Wanru coming, she specially waved her hand and repeatedly told Qin Wanru to take good care of Shui Rulan and be careful not to be pushed by others. As for going out to meet guests for the first time, she should be more decent. She must not make mistakes and make people laugh at her. Madame Dowager also repeatedly told her about all kinds of things. She was afraid that something would happen to them. Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan agreed one by one, and then they said goodbye to Madame Dowager and went out. The carriage had already been prepared. It was the best carriage in the mansion, which was specially prepared for Madame Dowager. At this time, it was specially given to Shui Rulan and Qin Wanru. The cushion inside was soft, and it was very comfortable to sit on. Qin Wanru helped Shui Rulan to lie down, and then sat down. When she was about to let them go, she suddenly heard Yujie whispering, "Miss, I just saw Mei Shui beside First Mississippi. It seems that she has been looking at us for a long time." A sharp light flashed in Qin Wanru's eyes, but she didn't show it on her face. She smiled slightly and signaled Yujie not to say more. With Qin Yuru's temperament, how could she be willing? First Miss, Second Miss and Madame Shui went to a banquet. "I heard that it is a banquet in Rue and Great Elder Princess's mansion." After inquiring about it, Mei Shui hurriedly ran back and reported to Qin Yuru as soon as she entered the room. A banquet in Rue and Great Elder Princess's mansion. Qin Yuru stood up in surprise. "Yes, it is Rue and Great Elder Princess's mansion. It is said that Great Elder Princess sent an invitation card to Second Miss and Madame Shui." Mei Shui covered her chest and gasped. How dare they go by themselves? Qin Yuru only felt angry and wronged in her chest. She was so angry that her face turned green. She reached out to press her desk, gritted her teeth, and said, "Prepare the carriage to go to Duke Yong's mansion." As the elder sister, she didn't go, but let Qin Wanru go. How would others think of her? No, she had to go with them. "Yes, I will tell them right away." Mei Shui nodded, hesitated and asked, "Do you want to report to Madam?" "No." Qin Yuru shook her head decisively, turned to sit in front of the dressing table, and told Mei Yan, "Dress me up and let others see who is the most distinguished and beautiful miss in our Qin's mansion. How can a little girl compare with me?" She was the first Miss Qin at the right age. Qin Wanru, a little girl who hadn't even grown up, wanted to climb over her head. She didn't know whether she was qualified or not. She wanted to let Qin Wanru see that even in Rue and Great Elder Princess's mansion, she was still the first miss who could suppress her. From Qin's mansion to Rue and Great Elder Princess's mansion, they had to pass through several busy streets. Qin Wanru looked all the way with interest and didn't feel bored. When Shui Rulan leaned against the window and closed her eyes to rest, she looked at the street outside with relish through the light gauze of the window. When they arrived at the place, they still wanted to see more. Rue and Great Elder Princess was the emperor's aunt, and her mansion occupied a large area. It was even faintly comparable to Prince Chen's mansion that Qin Wanru saw that day. There were many carriages in front of the mansion, and it could be seen that there were many womenfolk who came to Great Elder Princess's mansion today. There were 3 doors in Rue and Great Elder Princess's mansion. The side doors on the left and right sides and the main door in the middle were wide open, but everyone basically went through the side doors. There were not many people who could let Rue and Great Elder Princess open the main door. They were all respected old madams or some members of the royal family. The carriage of Qin's mansion entered the door on the left together with the other carriages. As soon as they entered the door, they saw an old maid squeezing through the carriages with a smile. After looking at the carriage of Qin's mansion, she asked the coachman, "Is this the carriage of Qin's mansion?" "Yes, it is." The coachman put down the whip in his hand and said respectfully. Even if she was just an ordinary old maid, she was still the old maid of Rue and Great Elder Princess's mansion, and he, a coachman of Qin's mansion, couldn't afford to offend her. "Please come with me. Our Great Elder Princess has already ordered Second Miss Qin and Madame Shui to go to the side," the old maid said with a smile. She looked very gentle and didn't mean to take advantage of Rue and Great Elder Princess's influence. She seemed to be a good person, which made the coachman of Qin's mansion feel a little relieved. An ordinary coachman was still a little flustered in the face of such a royal princess's mansion. "Follow this nanny." After receiving Qin Wanru's order, Yujie lifted the curtain and said, Then she smiled at the old maid in the carriage, which could be regarded as a greeting. After the old maid took the carriage of Qin's mansion around a few turns, they came to a parking lot. There were only a few carriages parked here, but it was not the place that was full of carriages and almost couldn't park anymore. When the carriage stopped, Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan came down one after another. The old maid was originally curious about what kind of miss could make her great elder princess keep thinking about her. She even specially ordered herself to park the carriage of Qin's mansion in a better place. At this time, when she saw Qin Wanru, she couldn't help but secretly praise in her heart. This miss was really beautiful, with a sweet smile and a little cute. She was a miss who made people feel comfortable just by looking at her. Madam Shui, second Miss Qin, please come with me. The old maid smiled and led the way in front. Qin Wanru held Shui Rulan's hand and followed behind. Along the way, the scenery was excellent. Looking at the scenery in front of them, it was really the place of the royal family. Everything was exquisite, which was very pleasing to the eye. Along the way, there seemed to be more people, and it could be seen that they were all walking inside. Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan slowly mixed in the crowd and walked inside with a group of womenfolk. Chapter 141. Qin Yuru came here with Countess Yong. On the way, she met several Mrs. Bosom friends and their brothers, and the group became bigger and bigger. Qin Wanru also walked and looked carefully. In addition to the womenfolk, she also saw several handsome childs. There was no formal banquet, and there were many people talking in twos and threes. Her long eyelashes fluttered. Looking at the scene in front of her, she understood that not only the womenfolk were invited to the banquet, but also the men. However, they were all young men and childs. She didn't know who received the male guests in Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion. It was said that Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion was the only master now, and there was no man outside to take care of the male guests. First Miss Qin, I heard that your sister is here. Is it true? Someone asked Qin Yuru. When Qin Yuru was in the capital city, she also knew several misses. Now that they came together, everyone was curious. Of course it's true. It's impossible to leave her in Jiangzhou. After all, she has to go to the capital city. Qin Yuru said vaguely, looking a little embarrassed. It seemed that she wanted to explain for Qin Wanru, but she didn't know where to start. You are too kind. You even speak for her. She has done such a thing. Someone sneered. Yes. She can't stay in Jiangzhou anymore. She has to go to the capital city. Is there anyone in the capital city who can marry her? She really thinks that the noble aristocratic family in the capital city will marry her. Another person said disdainfully, and his face was full of contempt. Qin Wanru stopped, blinked her watery eyes twice, and stopped moving forward. Shui Rulan also heard these words, and her face darkened. She wanted to raise her leg, but was stopped by Qin Wanru. Seeing that both of them stopped, the old maid of Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion also stopped and stood aside to serve them. Just now, the old maid in charge repeatedly told her that the second miss of Qin's mansion was very popular with Great Elder Princess, and she must remember not to look down on her because she was small and weak. Of course, she also heard the words next to her. She curiously looked at several misses who were talking enthusiastically and several young childs beside them, and decided to stand quietly. Will the son of an aristocratic family in the capital marry her? One moment she wants to marry this man, the next moment she wants to marry that man. Does she think she's playing house? It was a young man who raised his eyebrows and said disdainfully. Then he pushed Di Yan aside and said, Child Di, don't you think so? Di Yan's eyes flickered, but he didn't reply. He just smiled. Hey, Di Yan, when did you become so reserved? Even if she is your relative, you can't help such a woman. If this kind of woman was in the capital, she would be drowned in a pig cage. The onlookers thought that Di Yen couldn't speak harshly because of the relationship between the two families, so someone teased him. Don't talk about cousin. Cousin doesn't know anything. Actually, I don't know either. It's just some bad rumors. Mother told me not to talk nonsense. My second sister is actually pretty good. Qin Yuru explained for Qin Wanru with a gentle face, as if she really wanted to help Qin Wanru wholeheartedly. As he spoke, he revealed an anxious look on his face as he looked left and right. What's wrong? Are you afraid that your sister will see it? A young lady of Duke Yong tugged at her sleeve and said discontentedly, What are you afraid of? Even if your grandmother loves your sister, so what? You are the eldest daughter of the legal wife, and your sister is such a shameless bitch. No, my second sister is not such a person. Qin Yuru seemed to be exposed and said reluctantly. However, her explanation was met with a burst of laughter. Everyone felt that her second sister was very shameless. Although it was just a simple rumor, it could be heard that this second miss was a bitch. Big sister, are you talking about me? Hearing this, Qin Wanru let go of Shui Rulan's hand, took a few steps forward, came behind Qin Yuru, and said with a smile. Some people had already guessed which mansion such an exquisite girl came from when they saw her coming. Why had they never seen such a beautiful miss in their own mansion? However, when they saw her standing behind Qin Yuru and saying such a sentence, the people who were gossiping just now were immediately stunned. Everyone looked at the girl in front of them in astonishment. The first impression they had of her was that she was small, very small, and looked less than 10 years old. She was far from the delicate bitch in their imagination. After that, she was as beautiful as a glass doll, but she was even more lively than a glass doll. Her jet-black eyes seemed to be soaked in clear water, and when they moved slightly, one could almost see their own reflection. Her cherry lips were small and red, revealing a color that was different from other women's. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, making people feel that she was more exquisite. But even so, everyone was very clear that she was just a child in front of them. She was only as tall as Qin Yuru's shoulder. Her palm-sized face looked a little childish, and her earrings swayed. She looked dignified and elegant, but it still made everyone clearly realize that the person in front of them was just a child who had not grown up. A child? Unexpectedly, she was just a child. Was she really the debauched second Miss Qin who would snatch her sister's marriage and then go back on her word and not want to marry her? Why didn't anyone tell them that second Miss Qin was actually still a child? What did she know? Big sister, what did you say about me just now? Qin Wanru looked at Qin Yuru with a smile, slightly tilting her head, which made her look a little naive, and made those who had said bad things about her feel a little embarrassed. Such a young child, how could she do that kind of thing? I was talking about you with other misses. Qin Yuru was startled by Qin Wanru's sudden appearance, but she also knew that she would meet Qin Wanru, so she immediately calmed down and said, Am I very famous? I just arrived in the capital. Qin Wanru blinked her long eyelashes, hesitated for a moment, and said. Under her long eyelashes, her white and tender skin was like snow. As soon as she said this, several misses around immediately turned their eyes to Qin Yuru. They were all smart people, and the biggest reason why they were so unfriendly to Qin Yuru was that some rumors about Qin Wanru had been secretly spread to their ears, and then they shared them. Some of the rumors about Qin Wanru were accidentally revealed by Qin Yuru, and some were inquired by misses from Qin Yuru's servant girls and old maids out of curiosity. At this time, if Qin Wanru was a young girl who had just become charming, they would also believe that these words were true. After all, these words were not told by Qin Yuru herself, but they deliberately inquired from Qin Yuru. But the problem was that Qin Wanru was just a child, a seemingly naive and ignorant child. Did such a child really understand this kind of things between men and women? Moreover, she was just a child, how could she be so unbearable in the mouth of Qin Yuru's servants? It was really unbelievable. Thinking about it carefully, Everyone actually understood the twists and turns in the story, but they did not think about it at first. Some people's eyes became sarcastic. Looking at the expressions of the people around her, Chin Yuru was so angry that she almost crushed the handkerchief in her hand, and could hardly keep the gentle smile on her face. At this time, she also came to realize that if she had known this, she would have found a way to stop Chin Wanru. At this age, Chin Wanru was about to lose her virginity. If she let Chin Wanru out when she was a little younger, others would think that the words she had secretly spread before were true. "Big sister, I just arrived in the capital, and I don't know anyone. Why are you talking about me? Why do you all seem to know me?" Chin Wanru blinked her beautiful eyes and smiled at Chin Yuru, as if she did not know that she had successfully caused many misses to doubt Chin Yuru. Feeling the sarcasm in Chin Wanru's eyes, Chin Yuru became more and more annoyed, and her hand that was rubbing the handkerchief became stiff. But she had to show a trace of a hypocritical smile, and said with a forced smile, "It happens that second sister has just arrived in the capital, and many misses are curious about the misses who grew up in Jiangzhou." "Big sister, are you talking about Sister Rongji?" Chin Wanru continued to ask in confusion, as if she did not see the cold anger in Chin Yuru's eyes. "Who is Sister Rongji?" Someone could not help but ask curiously. "She is Big Sister's best friend, Miss Qi, who used to be the daughter of the magistrate of Jiangzhou. Now she also came to the capital with us, and she is living in our mansion." Chin Wanru explained with a smile. Although she was beautiful, almost all the misses present looked older than her, so they were not hostile to her. After all, she was still too young, and a girl without virginity was just like a child. She could not arouse the jealousy of the same sex, especially when she raised her little face with a bright smile. It was easy to win people's favor. Not only these misses, but also several childs from aristocratic families felt that the previous words were nonsense. "Is first Miss Qi the younger sister of the first young master of the Qi family that Miss Qin mentioned before?" A miss thought and asked. "Then it means that it is about the marriage?" "Second Miss Qin, do you know first young master of the Qi family?" A miss could not bear it anymore, so she lowered her voice and asked. "Yes, I do. Not only brother Tianyu, but also brother Baiyu and sister Rongji. Big sister and I grew up with them, and we even." Chin Wanru seemed to think of something when she said this, and quickly stopped talking. She reached out to hold Chin Yuru's hand affectionately. "Big sister, let's go." Chin Yuru looked like she had no grudge with Chin Yuru, and they were sincere sisters, but it also made the words that Chin Yuru deliberately spread more suspicious. Chin Yuru was so angry that her face turned red, and she subconsciously slammed her hand hard to shake off Chin Wanru's hand. Everyone was stunned, and then they understood. Before, Chin Yuru had always pretended to dote on her extremely bad sister in front of others, but now it seemed that not only was her words not true, but it was also intentional. This first Miss Qin from Jiangzhou did not seem to be as kind as she appeared. And this so-called faint rumor about Jiangzhou should not be true, or it had something to do with first Miss Qin herself. Some sensitive people had already thought that when the daughter of Magistrate Qi appeared in the future, they could inquire about this matter. Chapter 142. It happened so suddenly that everyone had no time to react. Chin Wanru subconsciously wanted to hold something. She wrapped a piece of cloth around her wrist and pulled it hard. Someone reached out and pulled her. She staggered a little and then stood firm. "Di Fenglan, what do you mean?" The woman who stood beside Chin Wanru and reached out to pull her was a bright girl. She was dressed in red like a flower, which made her face extremely outstanding. Although the bright red color was a little gaudy, it made people feel refreshed. At this time, she held Chin Wanru's hand with one hand and looked at a woman beside Chin Yuru with unkind eyes. The woman was dressed in a colorful peacock blue skirt with gold brocade, which was extremely eye-catching, but there was a little arrogance and disdain between her eyebrows. Glancing at Chin Wanru and the woman in red, she pulled up her sleeves and patted them gently. Then she raised her eyes arrogantly and said in a sharp voice, Yan Shulan, I accidentally fell down. What does it have to do with you? What makes you so angry? What's the matter? Do you dislike me? It was she who hit Qin Wanru with her whole body just now. Looking at the fence behind her, Qin Wanru's eyebrows flashed a trace of hostility. There happened to be a gap between the two sections of the fence. If Yan Shulan did not hold her just now, she would fall directly. Di Fenglan, this is not your Duke Yong's mansion. Don't think that others can't do anything to you. Yan Shulan said coldly. Yan Shulan, what do you want to do? You don't have to be like this if you dislike me. Qin Wanru didn't say anything, but you defended for others and argued with me. What do you mean by this? Di Fenglan said and glanced at Qin Wanru arrogantly with a disdainful face. Yan Shulan was so angry that her face turned red. But she did not see clearly just now, and she did not know Qin Wanru. Since Qin Wanru did not speak, she really had no right to say anything. She turned to Qin Wanru and said, Miss Qin, tell us if she deliberately pushed you just now. Don't be afraid. Tell us and we can all testify. Her words made everyone's eyes fall on Qin Wanru. Countess Yong proudly withdrew her gaze from Shui Rulan and also fell on Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru was just a child who came from a small place in the countryside. Although she did not speak, her eyes were full of contempt, which was the same as Di Fenglan's. She didn't believe that Qin Wanru dared to say anything at this moment. So what if she bullied her? Qin Yuru didn't say anything. A trace of complacency flashed in her eyes, but she pretended to be at a loss. At this moment, she just stood there blankly and didn't know what to do. There were all kinds of looks in people's eyes. Some were sympathetic, some were gloating, and some just wanted to watch the fun. Di Fenglan and Yan Shulan could talk like this in Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion, but it didn't mean that others could. Zhao Di and Zhao Yan in the imperial palace could be regarded as the emperor's favorite concubines. Given their identities, Rui and Great Elder Princess would definitely think highly of them. This was also the reason why they dared to quarrel here. But why did Qin Wanru? Everyone could almost imagine that she would put on a look of obedience, or pretend to be magnanimous and indifferent. She pushed me on purpose. Qin Wanru raised her head and her eyes fell on Di Fenglan. Then, when Countess Yong's face slightly changed, Qin Wanru raised her head and looked at Di Fenglan in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. After saying that, she also turned her eyes to the gap. There was a slope covered with pebbles from this position, so she must be seriously injured. Miss D, you are Big Sister's cousin and Madam's niece. This is the first time we meet, right? I don't know what I have done to offend you. Did I quarrel with you when I was young, so that you hate me so much? Qin Wanru slightly tilted her head and looked Di Fenglan up and down with a bit of childishness and confusion. The beginning part of these words was very fierce, but in the conclusion part, it could be heard that it was just a child's complaint. The confusion in her big black and white eyes revealed Qin Wanru's mood at this time very well, as if she really thought that Di Fenglan was narrow-minded and bore a grudge because of something she didn't know when she was young. If it was really this kind of thing, how could she bear a grudge? However, if it was not because of this reason, it was really because of Qin Yuru. At this time, how could others not understand? Everyone was silent at first, and then they burst into laughter. Yan Shulan on the side also laughed so hard that she couldn't stand up straight. This answer didn't sound very sharp, but everyone understood the meaning of it. Their eyes were full of contempt when they looked at Qin Yuru and Di Fenglan. Di Fenglan's face turned blue and white. Her face turned cold and she shouted at Qin Wanru, "Nonsense. Then Miss D, can you tell me why you are so hostile to me?" Qin Wanru said unhurriedly, without a trace of humility when she looked up. This question made Di Fenglan speechless and unable to say a word. "Well, Fenglan, if you don't go there, Elder Princess will be anxious." Countess Yong glanced at Qin Wanru coldly and helped her daughter out of trouble. Yes, mother. Although Di Fenglan was very unwilling, she also knew that she should not argue with Qin Wanru at this time. She secretly gritted her teeth and followed Countess Yong forward. You are so young, but you have a sharp tongue. When Countess Yong passed by Qin Wanru, she slightly stopped, squinted at her, and said coldly. Thank you for your compliment, madam. I am not as good as your daughter. Qin Wanru leaned sideways, and then said leisurely, directly rebutting Countess Yong with one sentence. Her voice was neither too loud nor too low. Not only Countess Yong heard it, but also the people around could hear it. Although no one said anything, the meaning in her words was a little unpleasant. Countess Yong had always been arrogant in aristocratic families. Being rebuked by Qin Wanru like this, she was embarrassed for a while. She suddenly stopped, turned her eyes from Qin Wanru to Shui Rulan, and snorted coldly, like mother, like daughter. If she argued with Qin Wanru, it would be like bullying the weak, so she directly targeted Shui Rulan. Her words caused a commotion among the people around. Everyone turned their eyes to Shui Rulan, looked her up and down, and secretly had many bad conjectures. Countess Yong's words really made people feel quite suspicious. Could it be that this woman had a bad character? Shui Rulan actually wanted to come over and speak for Qin Wanru, but was stopped by Qin Wanru. At this time, hearing Countess Yong's words, Shui Rulan looked up at Countess Yong, bowed politely, and then raised her head to look at Countess Yong, and said directly, Madam, do you have any dissatisfaction with me? Madam, what does my mother have to do with you? Do you know my mother? Or do you know that my mother compromised to marry my father to take care of me? Do you think that my mother didn't teach me well because I didn't compromise like my mother just now? Qin Wanru also raised her head to look at Countess Yong with a confused face, as if she didn't understand what Countess Yong meant. She looked like a child, but pretended to be an adult, and looked at Countess Yong as if Countess Yong was making fun of her rudely. Such an extremely incongruous look fell into the eyes of everyone, and immediately made them laugh again, and looked at Countess Yong with no respect before. Countess Yong couldn't keep her face, and her eyes moved from Shui Rulan to Qin Wanru. She snorted coldly and was about to say something. With her identity, even if she forced Qin Wanru once, others could not say anything. Some discerning people in the crowd sighed for Qin Wanru. After all, she was a child who was not very sensible, and made Countess Yong angry. Then she would definitely not end well, and not only her, but also her mother. An old maid suddenly squeezed in from outside the crowd. Seeing Qin Wanru here, she gasped and came over to salute. Second miss, why did you suddenly disappear? I just looked for you for a long time, but I didn't find you. Please come with me, Great Elder Princess is still waiting for you. After saying that, she reached out to the side, which meant that she wanted to lead Qin Wanru away. Thank you, Nanny. Qin Wanru smiled slightly, and her eyes flickered. She walked to Shui Rulan and said softly, Mother, let's go there quickly. She had long known that the old maid who led the way couldn't really ignore her affairs, so she said such harsh words to Countess Yong at the first time. Along the way, she had seen clearly that she was the only one who was led along the way, and it could be seen that Rui and Great Elder Princess really attached importance to her. It happened suddenly, and the old maid had no time to save her. But it had happened for a while, and if she still didn't react in time, she was really too stupid. And this time was just the right time. She wanted to let people know that Countess Yong and Shui Rulan didn't get along well, and secretly pointed out that Shui Rulan married into Qin's mansion because of her, not because she had an affair with Qin Huayong. There was nothing in this world that could not be leaked. If there was a little gossip about Shui Rulan in the future, Madame D and Duke Yong's mansion behind her would make a big fuss, so it was better to leak some information first. She didn't want Qin's mansion to be too close to Duke Yong's mansion. At present, with the matter of Di Fenglan just now, she simply pulled away the veil of tenderness from Duke Yong's mansion, and let people know that Qin Yuru and Madame Di, and even Duke Yong's mansion behind Madame Di, were hostile to her mother, so that Countess Yong wouldn't play tricks when she had to go to the banquet of Marquis's mansion of Fengyang in the future. If there was one, there would be another. Di Fenglan was a person who refused to suffer losses, and could find something to make trouble. Could she really bear it today? He just had to wait for her to come. Hearing Qin Wanru's words, Shui Rulan nodded and turned to leave with Qin Wanru. She looked weak, but not frivolous. When she looked at people, she was dignified and decent. Even if some people were a little more suspicious of her because of Countess Yong's words, at this time, seeing her dignified behavior, their doubts disappeared. As for Qin Wanru, she still retained her childish side and was also a person without scheming. Originally, no one knew which family Qin's mansion was. Now, seeing Qin Yuru and Countess Yong, many people had already found out that they were from Ningyuan Army General's mansion in Jiangzhou, which was also the family that Madame Di married. Some madams who knew what had happened at that time looked at Qin Yuru with a faint smile. They also vaguely knew some things at that time, but they didn't know whether it was true or not. Later, Madame Di married far away, and this matter was gradually forgotten by most people. But now, after such a scene, many people remembered it. But there were also some people who paid attention to Rui, and Great Elder Princess, and didn't understand why Rui, and Great Elder Princess specially summoned Qin Wanru. After looking at each other for a few times, they walked forward silently. Chapter 143. Mother. Di Fenglai had always been arrogant and thought that she was Zhao Di's favorite niece in the palace. She had never been ridiculed by a little girl. She stamped her foot. She said angrily, "Let's go." Countess Yong looked at Qin Wanru's petite figure and frowned. She seemed to be too hasty just now, and this little girl had the upper hand. Thinking of what Madame Di had asked her before, she knew it was not good. Just now, everyone could see that her mansion was hostile to the mother and daughter. It seemed that she could only play it by ear. This little girl was powerful. No wonder Madame Di had always been at a disadvantage. She had always been shrewd. Although Qin Wanru made her lose face, she calmed down after taking a rest. After walking with the crowd for a few steps, she even chatted with several madams on the side about some idle jokes. For a moment, she was full of laughter and didn't seem to be angry with Qin Wanru because of what had happened just now. She still looked calm. Di Fenglan twisted the handkerchief in her hand and walked behind Qin Yuru. She looked unhappy, but she also knew that this was not the time to talk. Although Zhao Di was favored, this was the mansion of Rui and Great Elder Princess, and it was not a place to be presumptuous. But she was really angry. She turned her head and wanted to say something to Qin Yuru. Suddenly, a little eunuch rushed out and shouted, "Make way, make way!" and rushed over. People all scattered to both sides. Di Fenglan reacted quickly. She turned her feet and hurriedly avoided him. But she didn't know whether it was because of a miscalculation or other reasons, the little eunuch bumped into her hand. He staggered 2 steps and subconsciously pulled Qin Yuru's hand beside her. Because of the heavy collision, the two of them rolled on the ground together. "Sorry, sorry." Seeing that he bumped into Qin Yuru, the little eunuch only said a few words and ran away. Countess Yong was angry and wanted to ask someone to catch the little eunuch back, but was stopped by an old maid beside her who reached out and pulled her sleeve. A little eunuch was not a big deal, but the master behind him must be someone from the palace. It was normal for people from the palace to attend Rui and Great Elder Princess's banquet. Every time Rui and Great Elder Princess held a banquet, some of those young princes would always show up. Sometimes all of them would come. But no matter which one it was, Duke Yong's mansion couldn't afford to blame them. The servant girls and old maids hurriedly helped them up. Di Fenglan was fine. She fell on Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru was pulled to the ground by Di Fenglan and happened to be under Di Fenglan. Qin Yuru's wrists were immediately injured. When she turned her wrists over, 2 bloodstains appeared on them. She couldn't help but cry out in pain, and tears started to fall. Yuru, how are your injuries? Is it urgent? Countess Yong stepped forward and reached out to hold Qin Yuru's hand. She carefully used a handkerchief to clean the pebbles stuck in Qin Yuru's white and tender hand and said with concern. Aunt, it hurts. Qin Yuru cried. Not only were there 2 bloodstains on her wrists, but her palms also hurt. Her hands were seriously scalded before. Although she used the medicine given by the palace when she arrived in the capital city, it took a long time for her palms to recover. Now the scars were not obvious, but they were still there if one looked closely. The new skin was very tender, and at this time, her palms also hurt badly. Yuru, why don't you go back to Duke Yong's mansion first? The doctors in the mansion are very skilled. Let's see your wounds first. Countess Yong said with concern. Yes. Although Qin Yuru was very unwilling, she had to nod with tears when she looked at her dirty and tattered sleeves. She lowered her head and wiped her tears. She was also a little angry with Di Fenglan. She finally entered Rui, a great elder princess's mansion, and didn't know many noble madams, but Di Fenglan ruined her plans again and again. But in front of Countess Yong, Qin Yuru didn't dare to say this. She could only wipe her tears with grievance, looking extremely pitiful. Mother, how about I? Di Yen said with some distress. But before he finished his words, he was glared at by Countess Yong. Knowing that he made his mother angry again, he hurriedly lowered his head. The marriage between him and Qin Yuru couldn't be settled because Countess Yong was not very satisfied with Qin Yuru and wanted to choose another wife. He really wanted to marry Qin Yuru, but he was clever enough to know that if he insisted on protecting Qin Yuru at this time, it would inevitably make his mother feel disgusted. He could only stand aside helplessly and secretly look at Qin Yuru. So Countess Yong sent an old maid and a servant girl to escort Qin Yuru back to the mansion. When they got on the carriage, the pain in Qin Yuru's hand also eased. With a gloomy face, she ordered the carriage to go directly to Qin's mansion. She didn't intend to go to Duke Yong's mansion. She had something to discuss with Madame D. Just now, Qin Yuru clearly saw how her aunt glared at her cousin. It seemed that she should ask her mother to urge her maternal grandmother to settle the marriage between her and her cousin as soon as possible. Master, I bumped into 2 people at once. Not only the miss of Duke Yong's mansion, but also the hypocritical sister of 2nd Mississippi, Xiao Xuanzi said with joy. In order to explain the scene just now, he deliberately made a few movements so that his master could understand the scene just now more clearly. Not bad. The lazy voice had a hint of laziness in it. Chu Luchen was sitting on an excessively wide wheelchair, leaning against it. His black hair was tied up high, and he was wearing a purple gold crown and a purple brocade robe. The black jade belt made his handsome face look even more like jade. His long eyelashes trembled twice, and his thin and colorless lips slowly curved into a smile, curling his lips. Although it was not a big smile, Xiao Xuanzi knew that his master was happy. Master, you didn't see that the first miss of Qin's mansion cried when she was helped up. She cried very pitifully, but Child D couldn't have tender feelings for her. He wasted first Miss Qin's tenderness. Xiao Xuanzi didn't leave after bumping into them. Instead, he hid behind a big tree and saw the scene clearly. Now he came back to tease his master. How dare he bully 2nd Miss? Didn't he have the face to do so? 3rd brother, what are you laughing at? Why are you so happy? Chu Liuxin came out of nowhere, with some mud on his face. He didn't look like a prince who came to the banquet aboveboard at all. It seemed that he had just come out of a dog hole. In fact, he was a little afraid to see Chu Luchen. In the past, he didn't dare to get close to Chu Luchen. But just now, he saw his 3rd brother smiling like a flower from a distance. He thought that his third brother, who was like a sickly beauty, must be in a good mood now that something good happened, so he dared to come over to greet him. Chu Luchen closed his eyes and weakly leaned against the railing of the wheelchair. He waved his hand, and his handsome face immediately looked lifeless, as if it had lost its color. Xiao Xuanzi apologized to Chu Liuxin and laughed dryly. "Your Highness, my master is not feeling well, so he can't play with you. Please forgive him." "Third brother, are you okay?" Chu Liuxin unconsciously lowered his voice and asked. Xiao Xuanzi shook his head gently, indicating that his master was fine, and then pushed the impatient Chu Luchen away. Looking at Chu Liuchen's leaving figure, Chu Liuxin's face fell. He squatted down unhappily and reached out to pull a weed on the ground. He looked very tired. "Your Highness, we'd better go and change clothes quickly. If Great Elder Princess finds out that you secretly climbed into the dog hole again, she will go to the palace to complain." Xiaoyozi, the little eunuch who followed him, knew that he was in a bad mood, so he also squatted down to persuade him. "Why does third brother keep ignoring me? I remember that third brother and I used to be best friends, but now he doesn't even care about me." Prince Xian, who looked like a young boy, felt very wronged. He actually wanted to get close to Chu Luchen, but Chu Luchen had always been indifferent to him, and even left without saying a word. It didn't seem to be like this when he was young. "Your Highness, Prince Chen's temper is a little indifferent. In addition, he is not in good health, so he doesn't have the energy to play with you. Maybe it's because he can't play, so he doesn't want to see you play happily." Xiao Liuzi comforted his master. His words reminded Chu Liuxin, and he felt a little better. He patted the dust on his clothes and stood up. Looking at Chu Liuchen's back as he walked away, a trace of malice flashed across the eyes of the young boy, who had been a little jumpy. In fact, he was not completely ignorant. The children who grew up in the palace were really naive. How could they grow up? There were so many children in the palace who didn't have time to grow up and talk to each other. "Let's go and see if eldest brother and second brother are here," Chu Liuxin said, turned around and walked out. He came the earliest. He had nothing to do after walking around, so he climbed out of a dog hole in the backyard of Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion. After walking around outside, he had nothing to do, so he climbed back in through the dog hole. Xiao Liuzi, who followed him anxiously, was panicked and afraid. A dignified prince actually climbed through the dog hole. If he was found by the palace, he would be skinned even if he didn't die. However, this little prince had never cared so much. Sure enough, a prince was not anxious about a eunuch. Now hearing that his prince didn't intend to make trouble anymore and wanted to put on the airs of a prince and travel with the other two princes, he felt at ease. "Your Highness, please come with me. I saw Prince Yu's eunuch just now." "Then let's go and see eldest brother first." "Let's go." Chu Liuxin was hot-tempered again. He happily turned around and ran out with Xiao Liuzi. In fact, it was not that he had a particularly good relationship with Chu Luyue. The main reason was that the second prince, Chu Liuzhou, was a headstrong and self-opinionated person. He often ordered his brother around. Chu Liuxin disliked the second prince, Prince Zhou, the most. Relying on the fact that he was the son of the empress, he felt that the throne would inevitably be left to him in the end. He had been disrespectful to his brothers a lot. It could be said that no one could intimidate Prince Zhou except for Chu Luchen. As the youngest son of the surviving emperor, Chu Luyue also had a temper. It was enough for him to keep a close relationship with his second brother, Prince Zhou, verbally. Rui and Great Elder Princess increasingly felt that there was something wrong. How could it be possible that no one even mentioned the child's biological mother, unless someone deliberately said so? "I didn't know that I had a biological mother before. I always thought that my biological mother was Madame D. But Madame D hurt me again and again, so I couldn't help but investigate it. Only then did I know that Madame D was not my biological mother, so she wholeheartedly put the blame on me for the sake of big sister. Qin Wanru said bluntly. Her voice was not high, and the girl's voice was a little aggrieved, but it was enough for Rui and Great Elder Princess to hear clearly. This child is another one who has no one to love. Rui and Great Elder Princess sighed and looked listless. Rui and Great Elder Princess, who originally looked young, seemed to be a few years older in an instant. Princess, such a child is sensible. You can see that second Miss Qin is sensible at first glance, and her temper is better than that of ordinary misses from aristocratic families. Nanny Gao's words were very meaningful. Qin Wanru blinked and seemed to be aware of something, but she didn't grasp it for a while. I hope Hao is the same. Rui and Great Elder Princess sighed again and reached out to touch Qin Wanru's beautiful hair. This child is obedient, but it's a pity that she has no mother to take care of her. Great Elder Princess, I have a mother now. She is very good to me. It is also because of me that she married my father. Originally, she wanted to be a monk. Qin Wanru raised her head and looked at Shui Rulan with a smile. A small face with a bright smile. Thinking of this child's life experience, people felt more and more pitiful. Rui and Great Elder Princess increasingly felt that this child was pleasing to the eye, and even Shui Rulan was pleasing to the eye. Originally, she invited Shui Rulan here just because Qin Wanru brought her here. At this time, when she heard that Shui Rulan married into Qin's mansion, she secretly nodded to Shui Rulan. Shui Rulan's temperament was calm. For so many years, she had been in the backyard of Qin's mansion. She rarely contacted others and was not good at talking. But she just sat quietly on the side with a gentle appearance. Anyone would think that she was a person with a good temper. If you have any problem in the future, you can come to me. Rui and Great Elder Princess said to Shui Rulan with a smile. Although Qin Wanru didn't say much, Rui and Great Elder Princess naturally understood the meaning in her words. She immediately knew that Shui Rulan married into Qin's mansion for some reason. Thinking that Shui Rulan married into Qin's mansion because she wanted to take care of Qin Wanru, Rui and Great Elder Princess couldn't help but feel a little more pity for her. Thank you, Great Elder Princess. Shui Rulan stood up excitedly and bowed deeply to Rui and Great Elder Princess again. Although she was not good at communicating with others, she knew that Great Elder Princess intended to help her. Originally, she had no foundation and only relied on Madame Dowager. Now if Rui and Great Elder Princess was willing to stand on her side, it was absolutely a great support. She also understood that this was Rui and Great Elder Princess's greatest kindness to her. Princess, it's almost time. Do you want to go out and talk with several old madams who rarely come out? Seeing that Great Elder Princess's mood improved a little, Nanny Gao smiled and looked at the sky outside and suggested. Has the one from Duke Xing's mansion come? Rui and Great Elder Princess nodded and was about to get up. But when she got up, she paused and her face darkened. Nanny Gao knew the knot in her master's heart. She immediately smiled and avoided the topic that could make Rui and Great Elder Princess unhappy. Your Highness, your favorite Master Hao is also here. Really? Where is he? Rui and Great Elder Princess looked excited. She reached out and patted the armrest of the chair beside her. Come on, bring him here. Let me have a look. I'm afraid, he is still outside. He can't come here if he wants to. Nanny Gao said vaguely. Humph, it's that old woman again. Didn't she deny it at that time? Now she holds him tightly. If not. Speaking of this, Rui and Great Elder Princess's face was a little red. Obviously, she was very angry. Let's go. I'll go to see Hao, myself. I want to know how he has been recently and whether anyone has bullied him. Saying this, Rui and Great Elder Princess stood up. It's still early now. You can go to the garden and stroll around. I'll ask someone to find you later. Rui and Great Elder Princess walked 2 steps angrily. Suddenly, she thought of Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan and turned back to tell them. Yes, Great Elder Princess. Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan stood up together and respectfully saw Great Elder Princess leave. After Rui and Great Elder Princess left, Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan casually looked around in the garden. There were many madams and misses who looked around along the way. Shui Rulan was tired after walking for a while. Qin Wanru found a pavilion for her to sit and rest. She didn't feel tired. She had climbed over the wall many times in Qin's mansion before, so she had good physical strength. She didn't feel tired after walking for a while. Instead, she continued to walk forward with great interest. Yujie was also not tired. Her physical strength was originally different from ordinary people. Now she also found it interesting to watch. The princess's mansion was magnificent and beautiful, so the master and servant walked farther and farther. Unconsciously, they walked farther and farther away from the crowd. After passing another moon cave door and turning around an exquisite rockery, Qin Wanru looked up at the osmanthus trees planted against the wall. The osmanthus trees were fragrant, and little yellow flowers fell on the grass below. There was also a shrub that was half a person's height, and several stones were scattered there. Even if it was just a small corner of the courtyard, it was full of different charm and great ingenuity. Hey, who are you? Pull me. Qin Wanru was fascinated by it. Suddenly, she heard a child's voice in her ear. She couldn't tell whether it was a boy or a girl, but she knew it was a child. She couldn't help lowering her head in surprise and looking around. When she came here just now, she didn't see any child. Where are you looking? Here. Don't you have eyes? I'm here. Can you see me? The voice seemed to be a little louder and a little angry. Qin Wanru walked in the direction of the voice in astonishment and saw a fair-skinned boy lying in the grass behind the shrub. He was about 6 or 7 years old and had a pair of big blinking eyes, which made people feel that he was cute. However, his face was sullen at this time, and he was not very polite when he saw Qin Wanru coming over. Come and pull me, I want to come over. The little boy patted the grass beside him and said impatiently. Qin Wanru took a closer look and found that the boy was not lying in the grass, but seemed to come over from the hole in the wall, but was stuck here. Looking at the high wall and the boy who was stuck, Qin Wanru couldn't help laughing out. Hey, what are you laughing at? Be careful, or I'll tell Grandma and beat you to death. The boy blushed, gritted his teeth and glared at Qin Wanru with a ferocious look. He even patted the grass hard with his hand, like a lively little beast, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, but with little strength. How can you be so rude? Qin Wanru squatted down with a smile and said. It's none of your business. Who are you in my family? It's none of your business. The boy's face suddenly became gloomy, and he stared at Qin Wanru angrily like a fighting rooster. Hey, how can you talk like this? Our miss is talking to you nicely. How can you be so rude? Which family's upbringing is so bad? Yujie also came over. Seeing it was a beautiful and lovely child, she also teased him. Chapter 145. His words were arrogant and overbearing. Even if the child had a pleasing and beautiful little face, it would still make people feel disgusted. The stone slid past Qin Wanru's ear. Qin Wanru didn't expect that such a beautiful child would suddenly hit someone so impulsively. She was caught off guard for a moment and only felt that the wind blew past her ear. She reached out and touched her earlobe, feeling some dull pain. The stone must have hit her earlobe. Yujie came over to have a look and screamed in shock, Miss, your ear is bleeding. The white and tender earlobe turned red, and there was a small wound, from which blood slowly dripped. Qin Wanru pressed the handkerchief to her earlobe, still smiling, Why are you so fierce? Although the boy was arrogant before, he didn't mean to hit her. Suddenly he hit her, which seemed more like a bluff. It's none of your business. Looking at Qin Wanru's hand holding the handkerchief, the boy felt a little guilty. He swallowed and subconsciously retorted, with a trace of arrogance flashing in his eyes. Well, then I don't care. You can be stuck there. Qin Wanru stood up and looked around. No one will come here. The banquet of the princess's mansion is about to begin, and no one may come in a short time. Moreover, this place is very remote, and maybe it will be like this at night. This place is very unclean. Who knows if something will come out at night? After saying this, Qin Wanru looked at the child who was panic-stricken and trying to hide his fear with pity. She curled her lips and deliberately showed a frightened expression. Yujie, we'd better go quickly. Don't let something unclean come out and eat people. I heard that this kind of thing is most suitable to eat children. Miss, I'm also scared after hearing what you said. This is not it, is it? Yujie opened her mouth to cooperate and reached out to point at the boy on the ground. She was trembling all over. The child who was stuck inside was afraid. Although he had been trying to hide his fear and not let others find out his emotions, his nervous eyes narrowed tightly. However, he still narrowed his eyes nervously and stubbornly refused to ask for help. He just bit his lips so hard that his lips turned pale. Seeing that Qin Wanru and Qin Yuru were really going to leave, he shouted, "If you don't pull me out, I will beat you to death when I get out." Ah, that's great. I wonder if you're still here when we come to see you tomorrow. Yujie turned her head and looked him up and down. Then she blinked at him proudly and continued to walk forward, ignoring him. The two of them, one in front and one behind, did not stop and disappeared behind the moon cave door. The sound of the wind rustling the leaves could be heard, sweeping the ground to reveal an empty space. Then, the wind blew against the wall, making a strange sound. In this quiet corner, it was especially frightening. The boy didn't feel afraid when he didn't think about it, but now he was sobbing. Tears fell down and he couldn't help biting his lips. He murmured, sister, come quickly. Come and save Hao won't dare to be fierce anymore. Come and save Hao He tried to struggle forward, but his little body had been stuck there and could not get out. The more he thought about it, the more scared and panicked he became. His little sobs turned into cries and his face turned pale. He looked at the place where Qin Wanru disappeared and tried to reach out. Sister, come and save me. Sister, come and save me. He looked so pitiful and did not have any domineering manner just now. Do you still curse? Qin Wanru suddenly appeared at the moon cave door, blinked her big black eyes and asked. No, I won't curse anymore. Sister, save me. The hostility on the boy's face had long disappeared. At this time, there was only a surprise when he saw Qin Wanru suddenly appear. He kept shaking his head, looking as pitiful as an abandoned child, and no longer the overbearing and annoying look he had before. Even Yujie, who had a lot of opinions against him, could not help standing on his side at this time. She called, Miss, and seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought. Qin Wanru came over and still squatted beside the boy. Her big bright eyes were filled with a gentle smile. You really won't curse or hit people casually? I won't curse or hit people. The boy nodded repeatedly. Are you obedient? Qin Wanru reached out her handkerchief and carefully wiped the dust on the boy's face and asked. Yes, sister, Hao is obedient. The boy nodded repeatedly. His big watery eyes seemed to be able to speak, and he kept nodding. After wiping his face clean, she found that the boy was really very good-looking, like a jade sculpture. Seeing that he became well-behaved and sensible, Qin Wanru looked at the place where he was stuck. In fact, the hole was not small, but because there happened to be a protruding brick at the opening, the boy climbed out carelessly and got stuck. After figuring this out, Qin Wanru asked Yujie to break off the protruding brick under the boy, and then carefully pulled the boy out with Yujie. After the boy was pulled out, Qin Wanru took him to sit in the corridor on one side, and cleaned the dust and mud on his hands with a handkerchief. Where are the people around you? It was impossible for such a small child to come out to play alone. Judging from his clothes and the words just now, she knew that this child was not a child from an ordinary family. Moreover, today was the banquet of Rui, and great elder princess, and the people who came were not ordinary people. Just now the wet nurse was still here. Then I wanted to go into the hole. She said she would get some food for me. Then she disappeared. The boy had cried a lot just now, and he still couldn't stop now. He sobbed, and his tender little face was wrinkled into a ball. Qin Wanru frowned. The wet nurse was so careless to leave such a small child to play, and she even ran to get food by herself. Speaking of this, it was really weird. Why did you think of going into the hole? But she didn't know the background of this boy, and it was not good to investigate the affairs of other people's mansions, so she changed the topic and asked curiously. I saw Prince Xan drilling a hole. He went out and then came back. It was very fun. The boy's hand was still held in Qin Wanru's. She carefully cleaned his fingers one by one. The boy sat beside her obediently, sobbing and answering obediently. I saw Prince Xan drilling a hole. Prince Xan going into the dog hole. Is it this hole? Qin Wanru's face became strange. He did go into the hole, and I saw it. But not this. The wet nurse said that it was a hole to go out. This hole is in the mansion, and it is safer. The boy replied, and reached out to gently push Qin Wanru. He blushed and shyly said, Sister, do your ears still hurt? How, was not good just now. He felt that he liked this older sister. This older sister was very gentle and would play with him. She would also carefully wipe his hands and face. In the past, these were all done by the servants in the mansion. But even the servants in the mansion would sometimes just carelessly wipe his hands for him, saying that it would get dirty in a while. I'm fine, it doesn't hurt too much. How, don't worry. I want to ask you, why did you go to such a remote place? Qin Wanru felt funny and touched the boy's soft hair, feeling soft in her heart. This was actually a lovely child, but she didn't know why this child pretended to be so overbearing and arrogant, but in fact, this child was soft-hearted. If the stone was really going to hit her, it should be thrown in front of her, and the target would be more obvious, but the stone was obviously to the side. The wet nurse told me that there were few people here and that there might be something fun to do. I happened to see Prince Xian sneaking around, so I followed him here. Later, he left, and only the wet nurse and I were left. The boy said eloquently. Where are the adults in your family? Why do they feel at ease to let a wet nurse take you away, but what about the others around you? Qin Wanru always felt that there was something wrong. If this wet nurse really had bad intentions, it was very easy to get into trouble. And now it seemed that this wet nurse was really not good, and it seemed that something was wrong. How, has no parents? The boy's head drooped down. He pursed his lips and blinked his big eyes. His eyes were red again, but he was trying his best not to cry. He wanted to show a strong smile on his face, but the smile was even sadder than crying. Qin Wanru sighed in her heart, reached out to hold the child in her arms, and gently patted his back. The boy suddenly sobbed again, stretched out a pair of chubby little hands to hold Qin Wanru like an octopus, and buried his head in Qin Wanru's arms. It turned out that he was a child without parents. No wonder even the wet nurse had bad intentions. Inexplicably, it occurred to Qin Wanru that she also had no parents. She reached out her hand and gently patted the boy's back, feeling very pitiful. Indeed, she was not the only child without parents in the world. She didn't know which family's child was like her. The people in Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion were in a panic because Great Elder Princess's grandson was missing, and it was said that this matter was related to Prince Xian. Immediately, Prince Xian was summoned to the backyard. After Rui and Great Elder Princess interrogated him personally, she followed Chu Yoshin to the dog hole in the back wall, but there was still no one there. Rui and Great Elder Princess was so anxious that she almost fainted. Chu Yoshin had no choice but to personally walk through the dog hole to find people outside. This kind of thing was originally okay to do in private, but now it was in public. Needless to say, after returning to the palace, he would definitely be punished. At the thought of this, Chu Yoshin felt that this was an unexpected disaster. The little bun of Rui and Great Elder Princess was so annoying. How could he learn this kind of thing from her? Next time, she would find a chance to beat this guy severely. Last time when she saw him, she thought he was cute, so she specially gave him her favorite new kuju. Not to mention that Chu Yoshin was angry, the whole mansion was also in a mess, while Qin Wanru was holding the child and dozing off. In fact, Qin Wanru was not sleepy, but the boy cried and fell asleep in her arms. Qin Wanru was not strong enough to hold the chubby boy, and he held her tightly. She was afraid that she would wake him up, so she had no choice but to lie down in the corridor and doze off. Yujie wanted to reach out and hold the child, but Qin Wanru did not allow it, so she could only wander around in boredom. Not far from them, a servant girl suddenly appeared. It seemed that she was also surprised to see Qin Wanru here. Seeing that Qin Wanru was holding a child in her arms, she hurriedly hid. After a long time, the servant girl reappeared, looked around furtively, and dropped a piece of paper on the ground. There were a few words on the paper. Qin Wanru. Child. Chapter 146. The remote corner was really remote. After waiting for a long time, the child's wet nurse still didn't appear. Qin Wanru could basically be sure that the wet nurse had deliberately disappeared. Seeing that it was almost time, she patted the child on the back and whispered, "It's time to get up." The boy seemed to be sleeping very comfortably. He twisted his body, turned his head to one side, and continued to sleep with Qin Wanru in his arms. He looked very cute. Qin Wanru smiled and reached out to pinch his little nose, while continuing to call him. This time the boy couldn't sleep. He opened his watery eyes and looked at Qin Wanru with a little confusion. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. He blinked his big eyes and showed a well-behaved smile. He didn't look like a little bully at all. "Let's go to eat." Qin Wanru's hand fell from his nose and gently pinched his rough, white and tender little face. "Sister." The boy murmured and wiped his tears with the back of his hand. He was very well behaved. "Little master, do you want me to hold you?" Yujie also felt that she liked him very much and took the initiative to ask. The boy looked at Qin Wanru and then at Yujie. He hesitated and shook his head. "No. I want to go with you." After saying that, he jumped down and took Qin Wanru's hand to walk out. They then walked out together. They didn't know the way very well. After a few turns, Qin Wanru didn't know where she was. She didn't know where the banquet was held, so she could only continue to walk forward. Yujie suddenly saw a servant girl passing by the door of the moon cave on the left. She hurriedly ran over and stopped her to ask the way. After pointing in a direction, the servant girl hurried away. It seemed that she was in a hurry. She turned around and was about to leave. But when she saw the boy holding Qin Wanru's hand, she was shocked and stopped. "Master How?" The servant girl looked at the boy whose little hand was held, and then looked up at Qin Wanru. She tentatively called, "Miss Qin. Do you know us?" Qin Wanru stood still in shock. "I know Master How." The servant girl glanced at Qin Wanru cautiously and answered in a low voice. "Then how do you know that it's me with your Master How?" Qin Wanru tilted her head and looked at the boy. Seeing that he was also looking up at her with a blank face, she knew that the child did not know this servant girl. The whole mansion knows about this." The servant girl murmured. She squatted in front of the boy and stretched out her hand. Master Hao, everyone is looking for you. You'd better go back with me to see Her Royal Highness. Get out of my way. I want to go with big sister. The boy pushed the maid's hand away and looked at her warily. He looked like a little bully again. Why does the entire residence know about it? Qin Wanru had an intuition that something was wrong. It was a coincidence that she met this child. How could the whole mansion know it? The servant girl stood up, looked at Qin Wanru, and then looked at the boy, as if she wanted to say something. Sister asked you to say it, so just say it. Otherwise, I'll tell grandmother that you bullied me on purpose and even beat me. The boy straightened his back and became arrogant. He glared at the servant girl threateningly. It looked very fierce. However, with his small stature, white and tender skin, beautiful little face, and chubby hands and feet, he did not look very threatening. However, it was obvious that the servant girl on the opposite side fell for his trick. After hearing what he said, her face turned pale with fear. She hurriedly waved her hands. Master Hao, I'll say it right away. You can't say that I bullied you. Tell me, what's going on? Qin Wanru smiled slightly and squeezed the boy's hand. The fierce look on the boy's face immediately faded, and he looked like a well-behaved child again. The servant girl lowered her head and said timidly, everyone said that Miss Qin took Master Hao away. Someone saw you take him away on purpose. I took him away. Why? Qin Wanru was puzzled. I heard that Master Hao offended Miss Qin, and then you were angry. You didn't know Master Hao's identity, so you wanted to cheat Master Hao away and sell him. The servant girl looked at Qin Wanru and suddenly felt that this news was completely wrong. The miss in front of her looked not much older than Master Hao. How could she be so vicious? Just because Master Hao, who had a bad temper, threatened her, she wanted to cheat Master Hao away. Tell me in detail. Qin Wanru heard something from his words. She thought of something and asked slowly. Seeing that Qin Wanru was not angry and still asked her in a soft and gentle voice, the servant girl calmed down, so she told her everything she knew. The child in front of her was Master Hao. This time, he came to attend Rui and Great Elder Princess's banquet with the adults of his family. Originally, he was with everyone. Later, no one knew why the child ran away and disappeared. Everyone was so anxious that this matter was even reported to Rui and Great Elder Princess. Rui and Great Elder Princess ordered everyone to look for Master Hao. Unexpectedly, they didn't find Master Hao, but found a piece of shredded paper from nowhere. Originally, this kind of shredded paper was not so easy to be noticed, but the servant girl beside Master Hao said that the paper was folded by Master Hao in the past for fun. So this piece of paper was sent up. The paper had been shredded, and the words, Qin Wanru, child, were vaguely written on it. For a moment, everyone didn't know who was called Qin Wanru. They specially asked several misses with the surname Qin, but no one had this name. Later, they heard from the people of Duke Yong's mansion that the first Miss Qin of Ningyuan Army General in Jiangzhou, who had just entered the capital, was called Qin Yuru. Then this Qin Wanru should be her sister. After that, the story became more and more mysterious. It said that many people saw this Miss Qin passing by, and it seemed that there was a child beside her. All in all, the final conclusion was that the second miss of the Qin family met Master Hao, the little overlord, on the road. Master Hao was overbearing, and his words might have offended the second miss of the Qin family. Therefore, the second miss of the Qin family had evil thoughts and tried to trick Master Hao into selling him. This matter was seen by a servant girl who could write. The servant girl was worried that she was alone, so she deliberately picked up a piece of paper dropped by Master Hao, hurriedly wrote 2 words, and then chased after him. Just after a while, the figure in front of her was gone. After listening to this story, Yujie was completely stunned. She looked at Qin Wanru and then looked at Master Hao, and didn't know what to say for a moment. How could she make up such a thing? She was so imaginative. Miss, this is too outrageous. Yujie was dumbfounded. Qin Wanru's face darkened. Such a ridiculous thing, such a ridiculous reason, but someone believed it. This was the result. Are you a servant girl in this mansion? A flash of lightning suddenly flashed in Qin Wanru's mind. That was the most critical part of this ridiculous thing. Her face immediately changed, and a trace of hostility flashed in her eyes. Because the cause of this thing was ridiculous, not many people believed it. But if the result was really like this, with the foreshadowing in front, how many people would believe her? If something really happened to Hao, these ridiculous remarks might become a fact. As long as Hao, disappeared, all the points pointed to her, and the false would become true. The key was Hao's safety. Thinking about it, Qin Wanru immediately understood her situation and what she should do now. Yes, I am. Can you find a few more people right away? Be quick. Qin Wanru ordered. I came here with a few sisters just now, and they are beside me. Call them all here. Qin Wanru said. Sensing the unusual atmosphere, the servant girl nodded and did not dare to delay. She ran out and soon came back with 5 or 6 servant girls. Don't make a sound, follow me. Qin Wanru said. The group of servant girls nodded and followed behind Qin Wanru. It did not take long for Qin Wanru to return. Soon, Qin Wanru walked to the place where Hao went through the dog hole. Before she arrived, she faintly heard voices. It seemed that 2 people were talking anxiously. Why is he not here? He should be here. A young woman's voice said. Then why don't you find him quickly? The other sounded a little rough, which should be an old woman's voice. How about you find him here, and I'll look around. When you find him, go directly to the dog hole in the backyard. There is no one there now. Okay. The young woman's voice said. Qin Wanru stood outside the door of the moon cave and signaled to several servant girls. Several servant girls understood and rushed out after Yujie. In front of the tree where Hao had been stuck, 2 maids were searching everywhere. Hearing a sound behind them, they turned around. Before they could see clearly who it was, they were hugged by the 2 maids who rushed over. Some pulled their arms, and some hugged their waists. It was easy for them to deal with one person with a few of them. One of them was a young woman in her 20s, and the other was a stout old woman in her 50s or 60s. The old woman was holding a big broom in her hand before, but now it fell to the ground. She looked ferocious and didn't look like a good person. After being pulled by several servant girls, the old woman struggled desperately and shouted, "Where do you bitches come from? Do you want to die?" The other young woman didn't struggle much, but her expression changed drastically. Her whole body was trembling, and she couldn't say a word. Qin Wanru slowly walked out from the back of the moon cave, and her eyes fell on the 2 people coldly. There was a smile on her face, but the smile was also cold. Which mansion are you from? How can you make a scene in Rue and Great Elder Princess Mansion? Shocked by her momentum, the fat old woman twisted twice, and finally restrained the fierce look on her face. She shouted loudly, "Miss, I am a servant in this mansion. I was sweeping the floor just now, and these servant girls rushed out without saying anything, which scared me. Miss, please order to let me go. This is Rue and Great Elder Princess Mansion. You are a servant in this mansion?" Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows. "Yes, I am." The old woman said confidently, "You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.